Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Valentina Trespalacios. Valentina Trespalacios was born on December 16, 2001, in Bogotá, Colombia. She is currently studying international business and commerce, but her true passion is music. Since childhood, she has loved music and pursued this passion by studying and becoming a professional DJ. After receiving her DJ certificate, Valentina started her career in Colombia and quickly made a name for herself due to her talent and exceptional musicality. Throughout her career, she has made many friends from different countries. Valentina has had the opportunity to travel to many countries to perform and showcase her talent. She has performed with famous musicians and has toured more than 20 cities in her country. She has also participated in important international events, including festivals in Colombia, Chile, Mexico, Brazil, and Peru. With her talent and musicality, Valentina has been recognized as having a bright future ahead. She is loved and sought after across the country and regularly performs at top nightclubs. Valentina is a cheerful young woman who is always smiling and loves to party. She also maintains social media accounts where she shares her performances and updates her followers on her daily life. Valentina shares two important aspects of her life on social media: her growing popularity in the music industry and her romantic relationship with John Poulos, an American she met online in late 2021. As their relationship progressed, their communication improved significantly. Initially, Valentina was not looking for a serious relationship, but she eventually became attracted to John, and their relationship turned into a romance. John Poulos, a resident of the United States, showed a deep interest in Valentina's life. Valentina invested a lot in their relationship, and John supported her financially to help achieve her dreams. Valentina took a cosmetic course, which included hyaluronic acid injections into her lips, and later, enhancements to her cheekbones. John also recommended surgery in silicone breast implants, which significantly changed her appearance within a few months. These changes made Valentina the talk of the town. John sent her money regularly and eventually decided to marry her. John Poulos initially planned to move to Colombia to live with Valentina. However, Valentina became suspicious of the relationship because she knew that John was extremely jealous and had hired a private investigator to monitor her every contact and activity. By January 2023, John had committed to marrying Valentina and began arranging the necessary paperwork. He had also rented an apartment in the northern part of Bogotá, where he planned to spend weekends with Valentina until they found a permanent place to live. However, on January 22, 2023, a garbage collector discovered a blue suitcase in a dumpster near a park in Colombia. The suitcase was taped shut and surrounded by several trash bags. When the worker opened the suitcase, they discovered the body of a woman whose head was clearly visible inside. The worker was so frightened by the discovery that he drove several blocks away before calling the police. The Capitol Police Department quickly dispatched a team to investigate the incident. The officers who arrived at the scene witnessed a horrific sight. The victim's body was found in a suitcase. After several hours of investigation, the police identified the victim as Valentina Trespalacios. An initial examination of the body showed no signs of violence, no weapons or knives were found, and there was no dismemberment. However, after opening the suitcase, detectives discovered that the victim was wearing pajamas with a belt. This suggested that the victim may have been attacked while she was sleeping. Additionally, police found a black cardboard box inside the suitcase containing items that could help identify the body, including a student ID card, a password that the victim often used, and several other documents and personal belongings. Investigators discovered something strange among the items they collected. These types of documents are not often found in similar cases. After finding the suitcase containing the body, the police contacted Valentina's family and learned that she had attended a party with friends on Saturday, January 21st. Forensic examination results showed that she had been hit multiple times in the head. Her body was found with severe injuries, including heavy bleeding on the right side of her tongue and 5 cuts around her neck, indicating that she had been strangled. After Valentina's murder, the police began questioning her friends and relatives. They started asking questions about Valentina's relationships. As a famous DJ with a hot body, she was a very popular and well-connected person. Among those questioned, a friend of Valentina's expressed concern and suspected Valentina's boyfriend, John Poulos, of being involved in the case because of his excessively jealous behavior. At this point, suspicions turned to Valentina's boyfriend, John, and a closer investigation into him was launched. The police initially relied on surveillance cameras around John's home, examining his actions on the days of the crime. John Poulos arrived in Bogotá at approximately 8:53 p.m. on January 19th. Surveillance cameras recorded him entering the apartment with a blue suitcase identical to the one used to contain Valentina's body. This information made John the first suspect to come to the attention of the police, as he was also the last person to see Valentina alive. When detectives attempted to contact John, the call was routed to voicemail. Valentina's family had appreciated John's calm and kind personality, and they did not think he was involved in this terrible crime, especially since John and Valentina had a wedding planned. Suspicions about John grew when investigators visited his rental apartment. There, they discovered that John had left and was nowhere to be found on Monday, January 23rd. It is worth noting that John Poulos deleted his social media pages early in the morning after Valentina's death, making him the only suspect at the time. Investigators analyzed surveillance camera footage in the building from Friday evening to early Sunday morning. This helped them clarify the events that took place. The Colombian police and the prosecutor's office also reviewed several hours of video footage from cameras in the area where Valentina and John were. Camera footage and WhatsApp conversations played a key role in uncovering Valentina's final hours. Valentina and John were scheduled to meet on January 20th. John arrived on the 19th, cleaned the apartment they would share, and then texted Valentina. Valentina and John began arguing that night because Valentina was partying while he was away. John questioned whether Valentina was with any men. Valentina refused to answer, believing he was jealous and suspicious. John eventually reminded Valentina to meet on the 20th. Before the meeting, Valentina planned to visit some beauty salons for eyelash and hair extensions to feel more confident. However, on the 20th, Valentina and John disagreed about the date and only clarified their plans when surveillance cameras recorded activities at Valentina's apartment that evening. According to the surveillance cameras, on the 20th, John helped Valentina pack her luggage at 6 p.m. when the two moved into their new home. Valentina also made a video call to her mother and said she would return after the trip. The video also showed Valentina with John Poulos, who had rented a car to transport Valentina's belongings. Valentina and John were caught on surveillance footage entering her new apartment at 7 p.m. Valentina and John were caught on camera engaging in some activities before heading home. It was Saturday, January 21st, at 1 a.m. They took a taxi to a nightclub in Southeast New York where Valentina was performing. When they arrived at the nightclub around 4 a.m., Valentina immediately started working. John Poulos stayed with her while she got ready. At around 5 a.m., Valentina's performance ended, and they then went into the club's office to meet the owner, his wife, and a companion. Valentina and John left the club around 6 a.m. That was the last time Valentina's friends saw her. She walked out of the club smiling and seemingly fine. Valentina reached out to a friend by phone on Saturday and said she had no plans to go anywhere. She planned to stay home with John and perhaps go out to dinner or cook together. Valentina's last conversation with her friend was via video at 9 p.m. Valentina's mother, Laura Hidalgo, said her 13-year-old son was the last person to talk to Valentina via video. Valentina was lying in bed with John, and they appeared happy. The family has no further information about their situation. On January 21st, at 10:43 p.m., surveillance cameras in the building recorded Valentina and John. Valentina was looking out of the apartment door while John stood in front of it, looking pensive, pacing back and forth, and occasionally grimacing. John was again caught on camera on Sunday, January 22nd, at 9 a.m. This time, he left the room with 2 bags of trash, and Valentina was not seen. John then drove to the parking lot, picked up a silver car, and put the bags in the back seat. Next, he returned to the apartment, took 2 suitcases from the trunk, and brought them back to the apartment. At the apartment, a gray blanket was placed on top of the suitcase that John had taken out. It was 10 a.m. He put this suitcase on the cart for transport. A second bag was placed next to it, and in this bag was Valentina's head wrapped in a blanket. Before leaving, John observed the parking lot after parking and noticed that there was no one nearby. He also checked the area around the elevator to make sure no one was getting off. Then he quickly returned to the car and tried to lift the heavy suitcase into the trunk. Finally, he took the bag and put it in the car, then drove away. The surveillance camera recorded the car circulating at various points in the city. Around noon, John appeared to be looking for a safe place to dump the suitcase. The car then pulled into a parking lot and parked near a dumpster. At 3 p.m., John got out of the car, looked around to see if anyone was following him, then took out the suitcase, which appeared to be very heavy, and threw it into the dumpster. He then returned to the car, took out a bag, and placed it in the dumpster before closing the lid and exiting the parking lot. The car then traveled west until it reached El Dorado International Airport, where John was last seen at 4:30 p.m. The Department of Homeland Security announced a $1 million reward on Monday, January 23rd, for information leading to the arrest of John Trespalacios. Colombian authorities sought Interpol's assistance in issuing an arrest warrant for John as he fled the country's borders. On January 24th, Panamanian National Police arrested John at El Dorado International Airport, just as he was preparing to leave for Turkey. Colombian authorities quickly began the process of deporting John from the country after Valentina's death. More than 14 criminal investigators were involved in the investigation, gathering evidence to clarify the truth. The result of this investigation included the analysis of more than 300 hours of video footage from security cameras, conducted in cooperation with the public prosecutor's office. An important discovery in the case was the finding of Valentina's cell phone near El Dorado International Airport. A security guard happened to see the phone on the grass while walking near a gas station and picked it up. After realizing that the phone did not have a SIM card, he took it home with the intention of selling it, not knowing it belonged to Valentina. However, the security guard's wife called him after realizing that the photo of the girl on the phone's wallpaper matched the photos seen on social media, as well as the photo of the young woman found dead in the trash. Unfortunately, the phone was put up for sale and repackaged because someone wanted to buy it. After leaving the nightclub, John and Valentina's driver gave his statement. The driver had been assigned to take Valentina and John to a nightclub in the south of the city. When John stopped for a moment, Valentina got into the car and shouted that she had written something. When the driver looked at her, Valentina seemed uncertain, and the driver checked his phone. The driver discovered that Valentina had warned him that she was in danger in a Spanish text message to customer service. John then asked Valentina if she was okay. While the car was being driven, John and Valentina conversed in English. The driver asked them if they were bilingual, and they answered yes. When they left around 4 a.m. that same day, the driver went to the nightclub with the couple. He then knew nothing about the incident until he was informed of Valentina's death a few days later. In the WhatsApp version open on Valentina's computer, a friend of Valentina's in Caragana provided the prosecutor's office in Bogotá with conversations on Valentina's computer, which offered clues about what happened. One of the key pieces of evidence found in the investigation of Valentina's case was a discovery by one of her friends, who found the suitcase containing her body. This suitcase was believed to have been in the same location as Valentina's. The friend also said that on the day Valentina was in Bogotá, she received messages from John Poulos and several selfies of him with the luggage. The suitcase John was carrying was very similar to the one investigators found in the case, though the color was indistinguishable. While it is unclear why Valentina left the WhatsApp session open on her friend's computer, the messages helped investigators understand what happened at night when Valentina was killed. Forensic investigators determined that she died of asphyxiation due to being strangled with a rope. There were also signs of violence on her body. The autopsy revealed that Valentina died in her sleep. Criminologists came to this conclusion because she was wearing pajamas. All the evidence pointed to John Poulos being present at the scene. However, in the indictment, John did not admit responsibility for Valentina's death. He argued that his arrest in Panama was illegal because he did not have a lawyer to assist him. John was not proficient enough in Spanish, and a translator was not present during the 5-hour hearing. John was charged with involvement in Valentina's death and deleted his social media accounts. John Poulos was born on May 19, 1987, in Wisconsin, USA. He is married and has 3 children. However, he also has a criminal record related to violence against women, including a restraining order from his ex-wife. One of the women who had a relationship with John Poulos revealed that he frequently visited pornographic websites, spending up to 5 to 6 hours a day on them. She also commented that John often exhibited strange behavior, such as fantasizing in telling ghost stories. Another model who interacted with John Poulos on social media said that she knew him as being from Texas, USA. She stopped contacting him after he made a strange comment, including the words jealous and death. Specifically, John asked her, "If I was at a bar, would you be willing to talk to me?" When the woman refused, John replied, "There's a chance one of us will die of jealousy." The woman also said that although John donated money to her, she never chatted with him via video because his communication style was often erratic. It's important to note that John also displayed some suspicious behavior towards Valentina. He contacted Valentina on social media and began sending her money persistently and consistently. In this case, treating women like property was a red flag that the women overlooked, and they initially trusted him. John thought he could buy their trust with money from the start. Authorities investigating the case believe that John Poulos thought that the waste disposal system in Colombia was similar to that in the United States, where he lived. In his mind, the waste would settle in a container and eventually be disposed of. However, Poulos overlooked the fact that recyclers and people living on the streets regularly rummage through trash looking for items they can sell or use. John Poulos is currently being held in a separate cell in Bogotá. The next step is to prove that all the evidence links him to the crime and to find the real motive behind this horrific murder in Colombia. The criminal code stipulates a prison sentence of up to 50 years for the crime John was charged with. John Poulos was subsequently sentenced to 42 years and 8 months in prison, was banned from approaching or attempting to contact the Trespalacios family for 20 years, and was ordered to be deported from Colombia after serving his sentence. John's defense team said they would appeal the verdict. They argued that John was innocent of Valentina's murder. Valentina's situation is similar to many others. She thought she had found true love, but it turned out to be a mistake. Does anyone feel safe connecting with strangers on social media? Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kelly Cochran. Christopher Reagan grew up in Detroit, Michigan, where he received his education. At 20, he decided to serve his country and join the military. He was stationed at a base near Marquette, where he met Terry, a young teacher from Iron River. They became friends, bonding over their shared values and interests. Their friendship grew into a close relationship, but Christopher's military service didn't allow for a romantic relationship. When he left the military, he moved to Traverse City, but the distance didn't weaken their bond. In 2012, Christopher proposed a long-distance romantic relationship, and Terry agreed. They shared many common interests, including a love of nature and a desire for a peaceful lifestyle. They decided to live together in Iron River, where Christopher found a job at a factory. However, after 2 years, their passion faded and they parted ways amicably. Christopher moved out and began looking for a new place to live. He found a job in Asheville, North Carolina, and started a new chapter in his life. On October 14th, he told Terry he had taken the day off and suggested they meet up the next day for a walk. However, he failed to contact her the next day, and Terry became worried. After trying to reach him for several days, Terry filed a police report about Christopher's disappearance. The police reassured her that people sometimes disappear and then return, but Terry was concerned. At the police station, Terry told investigators that Christopher had recently received a job offer in North Carolina and might have started a new life, cutting ties with his past. However, to avoid speculation, a detailed investigation was launched. The police identified the company where Christopher had started working and contacted an employee, but surprisingly, no information about Christopher could be obtained, as he hadn't shown up to work in 10 days. Search efforts were then focused on the local woods, where Christopher often took solo trips with specially trained dogs deployed to aid in the search. Unfortunately, no trace of him was found. Terry suggested searching Christopher's former apartment to rule out any accidents or potential clues to his whereabouts. Upon entering the apartment, detectives found it in disarray, with items scattered across the floor and open closets. Although it initially seemed like Christopher was simply a messy person, Terry knew him to be more organized. The detectives began to suspect that the disarray might be related to a crime. After inspecting the apartment, they decided to expand the search area. They eventually found Christopher's car outside the city limits, about 8 miles from Iron River. Inside the car, they found ordinary clothes and a piece of yellow paper with a route written on it. The route had no specific address, but detailed notes described the path, including turning at a bus stop or driving past a gas station. Terry explained that Christopher, despite living in Iron River, wasn't familiar with the street names, so he wrote down directions in this way. The detectives followed the route, which led them to a house in a neighboring town. Upon knocking on the door, they met Jason Cochran, an overweight man, and his wife Kelly. The officers informed the couple that they were investigating Christopher's disappearance and found a piece of paper with their address in his abandoned car. Kelly revealed that she worked with Christopher at the same plant, and they were friends. Although Kelly hadn't been in contact with Christopher recently, she had tried to reach him via text messages in mid-October. She assumed he had started his new job in North Carolina and didn't respond. Kelly also mentioned Christopher's health issues, which might have led him to start anew. The investigators were puzzled by the route leading to the Cochran home and why it was in Christopher's car. Despite the lack of answers, the couple cooperated with the investigation. After further questioning, the detectives left the Cochran home and proceeded to interview Christopher's co-workers at the factory. There, they discovered that Christopher was having an affair with Kelly Cochran, which had been rumored for months. The investigation into Christopher's disappearance sparked a new lead when Kelly Cochran made a surprising statement. investigators decided to re-question Kelly and her husband Jason to get to the bottom of their relationship. Kelly eventually admitted to having an affair with Christopher, but initially withheld the information because of her husband's presence. Kelly claimed that she and Jason had an open relationship and Jason was okay with her infidelity. However, Christopher's co-workers disputed this, saying that Jason did not approve of the affair and that the Cochran family did not have an open relationship. When Jason was questioned, he revealed that he was strongly opposed to his wife's infidelity, making him a suspect. However, the lack of concrete evidence meant that the investigators couldn't conclude that he was involved in Christopher's disappearance. Kelly and Jason were released from the police station, and the investigation continued for 5 months without a breakthrough. A new investigator, Detective Jeremy Ogden, took over the case and began a thorough analysis of the Cochran family's history. Kelly and Jason had met in high school and started living together after graduation. Despite their personality differences, they got married and started a swimming pool maintenance business. Jason handled most of the work, but the physical demands took a toll on his health, leaving him with back problems. When Jason's condition worsened, Kelly took over the business. During this time, Kelly sought ways to help her husband recover, including finding a medicinal plant that could help alleviate his back pain. However, the plant was banned in their state, so they moved to Michigan in 2014 to access it. In Michigan, Kelly and Jason got jobs at the same plant where Christopher worked. Kelly and Christopher became close friends, which was important to him given his relationship troubles with Terry. The prosecutors eventually obtained a search warrant for the Cochrans' home, but the search yielded no evidence linking them to Christopher's disappearance. The only significant find was a book written by Jason under a pseudonym inspired by video games. The title of the book caught their attention, but its content was disturbing. The book described violent murder scenes targeting everyone who had ever wronged Jason. The detectives read it thoroughly and found a character that matched Christopher's profile exactly. This strengthened their suspicions about Jason, making them wonder if he wasn't making up the crimes, but instead drawing inspiration from real events he had committed. 3 weeks later, the police decided to conduct another search of the Cochran house, hoping to find evidence they might have missed the first time. However, when they arrived, they found the house empty and the family had moved to Indiana. This made the investigators anxious, as they feared they might not find the crucial evidence they had been searching for months, particularly DNA samples from the suspects. Michigan police contacted their Indiana counterparts to help collect DNA samples from the Cochrans. The Indiana police officers went to the Cochrans' new home, and Jason and Kelly did not object to the procedure, as there was no concrete evidence linking them to the murder. Time passed, and on February 22, 2016, Kelly called the police, frantic, saying her husband Jason was unresponsive. When the rescue team arrived, they found Kelly in a panic, trying to obstruct the doctors. Jason was sitting in a chair, his face severely burned as if from extreme overheating. The doctors confirmed his death, and the body was sent for forensic examination. During the search of the Cochrans' new home, an officer discovered a syringe needle near the bed. The forensic report revealed that Jason's death was not due to drug abuse, as initially suspected, but rather strangulation, confirmed by bruises on his neck and face. This discovery turned Jason, the prime suspect in Christopher's kidnapping, into a victim himself. The investigation became even more complex, and forensic experts shifted their focus to Kelly Cochran, who now became the prime suspect in both Christopher's disappearance and her husband's murder. Kelly was invited to the police station to testify in Jason's murder case. During the interrogation, the investigators asked her directly if she had administered excessive doses of illegal drugs to her husband or was involved in his death. However, despite the pressure, Kelly did not confess to either crime. Months later, the investigators still lacked concrete evidence to prove Kelly's guilt and justify an arrest. During the investigation, Detective Jeremy Ogden met Walter Hammerman, a close friend of Jason's, who insisted that illegal drugs could not have caused Jason's death, as he knew his friend well and would have been informed about any changes in his life. Jason had been using medicinal herbs to alleviate his chronic back pain. However, his friend Walter noticed a significant change in his behavior around March last year. Jason confided in Walter about the mounting pressure from the Iron River police, who suspected him and his wife Kelly of involvement in a man's disappearance. The ordeal had taken a toll on Jason, leaving him depressed and even suicidal, which required intensive treatment. Walter observed that Kelly had begun to exert more control over Jason's life, making him increasingly anxious and withdrawn. Jason would avoid social gatherings when Kelly was around, and their video game sessions had become a thing of the past. These observations proved crucial in the investigation, helping detectives understand the dynamics within the Cochran family. After the medical examiner determined that Jason's death was by strangulation, Detective Ogden devised a plan to lure Kelly into a trap. The plan involved using Walter as bait to prompt Kelly into making a mistake. Walter agreed to play along, and on March 12, 2016, he called Kelly under police surveillance. He pretended that Jason had given him a letter containing vital information, which Kelly was supposed to send to the police if anything happened to Jason. However, Kelly suddenly told Walter to drop the idea, catching both him and the police off guard. Despite this, detectives still lacked concrete evidence, and Kelly continued to deny her involvement during subsequent interrogations. On April 26, 2016, Kelly seemingly evaded the authorities, prompting a federal manhunt. Walter, who had cooperated with the police, was shocked and fearful that Kelly might evade justice and potentially target him. The police eventually tracked Kelly's phone to the West Coast, and on April 28th, they arrested her at her cousin's home in Wingo, Kentucky. Once in custody, Kelly confessed to her relationship with Christopher Rain, revealing that she had wanted to leave her husband and start a new life with him. However, when Jason discovered her infidelity, their situation escalated, and Kelly was bound by a pact they had made on their wedding night, obliging her to kill her lover if her cheating was exposed. Kelly Cochran claimed she never intended to follow through on an agreement she made with her husband, Jason, but he was determined to see it through. The agreement was a threat to kill Christopher Rain, Kelly's lover, if she didn't end the affair. Kelly didn't want to do it, but she ultimately helped Jason commit the crime. On October 14, 2015, Christopher arrived at Kelly's house while her husband was away. Kelly offered him dinner and intimacy, and they went upstairs to the bedroom. However, Jason suddenly appeared, panicked and holding a rifle. Without hesitation, he shot Christopher in the head, killing him instantly. Under Jason's direction, Kelly helped dismember Christopher's body using a hacksaw, detaching his limbs and head from his torso. They placed the remains in trash bags and dumped them in the woods near Crystal Falls. They also drove Christopher's car away from the house to avoid suspicion and thoroughly cleaned the house to remove evidence of the crime. Kelly later confessed to her role in the crime, saying she wanted revenge against Jason for forcing her to end her affair with Christopher. She was deeply in love with Christopher and felt Jason had deprived her of happiness. Months later, on February 22, 2016, Kelly killed Jason by suffocating him after giving him a lethal dose of medication. She then helped the police find Christopher's remains, which were buried in the woods near Crystal Falls. A team of investigators and a canine unit searched the area and eventually found a human skull with a bullet hole, confirming it was Christopher's severed head. A .22 caliber bullet, a broken gun, and glasses likely belonging to Reagan were found at the scene. Dental records were used to identify the victim's remains, finally solving the 2-year-old missing person case. In April 2016, Kelly Cochran was formally charged with the murders of Christopher Regan and Jason Cochran. On February 13, 2017, the 34-year-old was arraigned in Michigan State Court. The prosecutor argued that Kelly was the mastermind behind both crimes and that her motive was rage and jealousy. Christopher viewed their relationship as casual, but Kelly genuinely loved him and wanted a future together. When Christopher refused to commit, Kelly decided to kill him, making up a story about a pact with her husband. The prosecution had strong evidence, including Kelly's confession in court. However, Kelly claimed she was being abused by her jealous husband, who had planned and committed the crime. She said he hid in the basement, caught the lovers off guard, and then shot Christopher in a rage. Kelly claimed Jason suggested dismembering the body and coerced her into helping by threatening to kill her. This version raised doubts about Kelly's guilt, but the jury still found her guilty of premeditated murder. Kelly was sentenced to life without parole. Jason Cochran's case was settled with a plea agreement, and Kelly received an additional 65 years in prison. Kelly was sent to Crown Point Correctional Facility in Michigan, where she is serving her sentence and regrets that her personal life didn't work out. In a phone interview, Kelly said, "I tried to do what I thought was right. I got married." She also shared, "It was good in the beginning, but in the end, all my efforts were in vain. All I did was work while my husband played computer games." In prison, Kelly continues to reveal details of her crimes, claiming she and Jason committed more crimes and that Christopher was just one of their many victims. However, Kelly's claims are difficult to verify, and there is no concrete evidence to support them. Her brother has also heard similar claims, but there is no evidence to back them up. Detective Jeremy Ogden is investigating the details, hoping to find evidence of other possible crimes committed by Kelly and Jason Cochran. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sarah Pappenheim. Sarah Pappenheim was born on January 30th, 1997, in Minnesota. She was the second child of Donnie Odegaard and Jerry Pappenheim, with an older brother named Josh. The siblings developed a strong bond as they grew older. When Sarah was in second grade, her family relocated from Minneapolis to Redding, California. She graduated from Foothill High School in 2015, where she was an active member of the school band and played the drums. Sarah was passionate about music, especially drumming. She was a skilled drummer and regularly played at jam sessions in Redding. As one of the few female drummers, she stood out on stage. When Sarah was 18, she moved back to her hometown in Minnesota with her mother and brother after her parents got divorced. There, she continued to play drums at different venues and eventually met Bernard Allison, a famous blues guitarist and singer. Allison was impressed with her skills and invited her to join him on stage occasionally. By the time Sarah turned 19, she had become a local celebrity among blues fans, known for her bright smile, which earned her the nickname Ronald McDonald. Meanwhile, her brother Josh was struggling with depression and mental health issues after their parents' divorce. Tragically, on an ordinary day in February 2016, the police arrived at their doorstep and delivered devastating news to Sarah's mother. Josh took his own life at the age of 20, leaving his loved ones, especially his mother Sarah, heartbroken. The bond between Sarah and Josh was incredibly strong, and his passing devastated her. To cope with her loss and to help others who struggle with mental health, Sarah decided to study psychology. She had been in touch with Nico Carson Major, who lived in the Netherlands, and she moved there to pursue her studies. At Erasmus University in Rotterdam, Sarah began her psychology program with Nico's support, who not only helped her navigate her grief but also assisted her with her studies as a native speaker. Sarah's passion for music never faded despite her focus on studies and work. She stayed in touch with Bernard Allison, a musician she had performed with, and shared her dream of buying a drum kit. In January 2017, Bernard's band toured Europe, and on Sarah's 20th birthday, January 30th, she attended Bernard's concert in Germany with Nico. Bernard spotted her in the audience, invited her on stage, and let her play the drums with them, just like old times. Sarah lived on the third floor of an apartment complex near the university in Rotterdam. As 2018 drew to a close, she planned to spend Christmas in the United States and booked a flight for a week before New Year's Eve. However, on December 12th, her life took a devastating turn. When a police officer appeared at her doorstep, just like in 2016 when her son had passed away, Sarah's legs began to shake. She instinctively knew what the officer was about to tell her, but couldn't bear the thought of losing another loved one. When the officer informed Sarah's mother that her daughter had passed away, she was overcome with grief and lost consciousness. This devastating news came just a year after the loss of her son, who had died at the age of 20. Sarah was only 21 years old. Sarah lived in a student complex on the third floor, where she rented an apartment with her roommate, Joel Schelling. Joel was also a musician, and music was the common interest that brought them together. Unlike Sarah, who was outgoing and always smiling, Joel was more reserved and had a temper. Despite their occasional quarrels, Sarah remained a supportive friend to Joel, often calming him down when he became angry. However, the situation took a turn for the worse over time. Just 6 days before her death, Sarah confided in her friend Adam Pryor that she was afraid of Joel, who had threatened to harm 3 people he disliked. Sarah knew she had to go to the police. Just a couple of days before her death, she had spoken to her mother on the phone about her concerns. Sarah's roommate, Joel, was behaving in a way that was increasingly bothering her. Her mother advised her to find a new place to live as soon as possible and to avoid Joel until she could move out. On December 12, 2018, at 12:20 p.m., the police received a call from Sarah and Joel's next-door neighbors, who reported hearing a loud fight and then Sarah screaming. When the police arrived, they found Sarah lying on the floor with multiple stab wounds. Despite attempts to revive her, Sarah died from her injuries. The police immediately began searching for Joel, who was nowhere to be found. Neighbors reported that he had left the apartment in a hurry, taking a large double bass with him. This distinctive instrument became a key detail in the police's description of Joel. Less than 2 hours after the crime, 23-year-old Joel Schelling was arrested at Eindhoven train station, about 60 miles from Rotterdam. He was on his way to visit his parents, who lived in Eindhoven. After Joel was arrested, he made a shocking confession to his mother while on the train. He told her that he had taken Sarah's life. The judge subsequently placed Joel under arrest for 14 days to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. Meanwhile, forensic experts conducting the autopsy on Sarah's body found 27 stab wounds, with several of them on her neck, abdomen, and back. 2 days after Sarah passed away, her mother, Donnie Odegaard, traveled to the Netherlands to arrange for her daughter's body to be returned home. However, this required raising $40,000, a task that was made possible by the generosity of strangers who cared for the family. Upon learning of Joel's arrest, Donnie Odegaard inquired if her daughter had contacted the police. Sarah had instead reached out to social workers, who visited Joel and found him calm. However, the next day, Sarah again contacted social services due to Joel's erratic behavior, including hitting himself with a hammer and threatening to harm multiple people. The case against Schelling began in March 2019. Schelling was accused of causing Sarah Pappenheim's death and admitted his guilt. However, he claimed he did not remember the actual act of taking her life. According to Schelling, he recalled fighting with Sarah, but his next memory was of being in the shower, cleaning himself. Sarah's mother, Donnie Odegaard, attended each hearing, relying on an interpreter to understand the proceedings. During the trial, Schelling stated that he suffered from delirium and heard voices in his head. However, when asked if these voices had instructed him to fight with Sarah, Schelling said he did not know and could not recall. He also could not remember the cause of their fight. Prior to the verdict, Experts testified that Schelling suffered from multiple disorders and required long-term treatment. Despite this, they concluded that Schelling was responsible for Sarah's death. The verdict was announced in December 2019. Sarah Pappenheim's death occurred before she could receive a response to her second request for support, after her initial request for assistance from social workers went unresponded due to the specialist's unavailability. The medics concluded that Schelling was aware of the initial fight and scuffle with Sarah and had the opportunity to either stop the altercation or grab the knife. By choosing the latter, he should be held accountable for his actions. The prosecutor requested a 10-year prison sentence, but the judge in Rotterdam gave Schelling a 6-year prison term, followed by an indefinite sentence in a psychiatric hospital. The court reduced the sentence from 10 years due to Schelling's relatively young age and his significantly diminished mental capacity at the time of the crime. This means that the court did not consider Schelling fully responsible for his actions. When handing down the sentence, the court released a detailed explanation stating that, although the crime was severe and unpredictable, Schelling's serious psychological disorders made it likely that he would commit another violent crime. The court noted that Schelling suffers from chronic psychological disorders that require ongoing treatment in a clinical setting. The court viewed psychiatric detention as a punitive measure for Schelling, who has expressed a willingness to undergo treatment for depression and other disorders. The court has ruled that Schelling will remain in treatment until it determines he is well enough to be released. The court will review his status every 2 years. Additionally, Schelling has been ordered to pay €68,700 in compensation to Sarah's family. Doni Odegaard is outraged by the sentence, believing it is too lenient. She thinks Schelling should have received a minimum sentence of 10 years in prison. In her opinion, Schelling would have faced a much harsher sentence in the US, such as life imprisonment or the death penalty, which would have prevented him from committing a similar crime in the future. She is also concerned that Schelling may be eligible for parole in as little as 4 years and vowed to do everything in her power to keep him behind bars. An investigation was also conducted into the social workers who had interacted with Sarah. The investigation concluded that the social workers could not be held accountable for failing to identify Schelling's disorders because they did not possess the necessary expertise to make such a diagnosis. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Diana D'Aiello. Diana D'Aiello was born in 1959 in a quiet suburb city of Los Angeles called Tustin. Her dad was in the military and her mom worked at a small clothing factory. When Diana was 19, she met a guy named Kevin Green. She was at a bar with her friend when some men started bothering them. He was being too pushy, so Kevin decided to step in. After he made the guy go away, Diana offered to buy him a drink to say thanks. A few days later, they went on a date, and things moved pretty fast from there. At the time, Kevin was already married, but he and his wife were in the process of getting divorced. Meanwhile, he and Diana moved in together, and she got pregnant. As soon as Kevin's divorce was finalized, they got married the same day, eagerly awaiting the birth of their daughter. They rented an apartment in a small complex in Tustin. Kevin served in the Marines, working as a helicopter mechanic at the nearby base. Diana used to work with her mom at the clothing factory, but as her pregnancy progressed, she chose to stay at home and prepare for the arrival of their daughter. By the end of September 1979, Diana was 9.5 months pregnant and due to go to the hospital any day now. On the evening of September 30th, after watching a movie together, Diana and her husband got into an argument. The stress of impending parenthood had been weighing on both of them, so they'd been fighting quite a bit lately. Kevin decided to take a drive to a nearby fast food joint to clear his head and also avoid making the whole situation even worse. About 40 minutes later, a local police department received a chilling call. It was Kevin, and he said that someone had shot his wife and she needed an ambulance as soon as possible. A patrol car was nearby, and officers quickly arrived at the scene. On entering the apartment, they found Diana lying on the bed in her bedroom, covered in blood, seemingly from a head wound resembling a gunshot. The bedroom wall was also splattered with blood. Diana showed signs of life, trying to breathe, so the officers started performing first aid while they waited for the ambulance. They also asked Kevin to leave the room as they were still unsure of what had happened. The medics soon arrived and carefully moved Diana into the ambulance. At first, they also thought she had a gunshot wound, but they quickly realized it wasn't the case. The wound appeared to be caused by blunt force trauma. Kevin wanted to go with his wife, but the police didn't allow him to. They needed to take his statement, and at that moment, they were considering all possible scenarios, including his involvement in the attack. Kevin was clearly in shock and seemed to struggle to comprehend the officer's words. He even attempted to get into the ambulance, so they had to stop him as it drove away. He began to regain his composure and finally told the police what had happened that night. Kevin explained that he and his wife had an argument, so he decided to go to a fast food joint to get burgers and clear his head. When he left the apartment, he realized he had left his keys inside, but he chose not to go back for them. He simply shut the door and headed to his car. Kevin also mentioned that not far from their apartment complex, he saw a van with its back door open, and there was an African-American man walking back and forth to it. Given that it was around 2 a.m., Kevin found it a bit unusual. He drove to his favorite fast food place, but there was a long line, so he went to another one of the same chain a few miles away. He bought some burgers and headed home, which took about 40 minutes. When he got to the front door, Kevin found it wide open. He rushed inside and heard strange sounds like someone snoring. Upon entering the bedroom, he saw Diana covered in blood, struggling to breathe, and immediately called the police. Some parts of Kevin's story immediately raised questions for the officers. For example, his decision to go for burgers in the middle of the night seemed odd, and the whole trip also took him about 40 minutes, which was quite long considering that all the restaurants were close to his home. Nevertheless, officers inspected the fast food bag, and the food was still warm. The receipt contained the restaurant's address and the time of purchase, corroborating his account. Based on this, the police allowed Kevin to go to the hospital, but first, they had asked him to provide a blood sample. DNA analysis wasn't available at the time, but experts could compare the blood traces found at the crime scene with Kevin's blood type. When Diana arrived at the hospital, doctors confirmed that the wound on her head was not from a gunshot. Most likely, the assailant used a small but heavy object, like a piece of wood, and inflicted a series of blows. At the hospital, Diana slipped into a coma, and doctors worked tirelessly for several hours to save both the woman and her unborn child. They eventually managed to stabilize Diana's condition, but she still needed surgery. Meanwhile, investigators asked medical experts to determine if Diana had been sexually assaulted. Diana's position when found made officers consider this possibility. The experts later confirmed this, finding semen traces on her body. However, there were complications. Kevin had told detectives they were intimate a few hours before the argument, but DNA analysis was unavailable then. So despite having a biological sample from the perpetrator, little could be accomplished. Kevin and Diana's relatives spent the entire night at the hospital, hoping Diana and her baby could survive the attack. However, by morning, something unexpected happened. One of the monitors detected a sharp deterioration in the baby's condition, and despite the extensive efforts of the doctors, the baby didn't survive. As for Diana, medics performed surgery immediately after the baby's death, and her condition was stabilized. She remained in a coma, but her chances of survival were now considered high. However, doctors didn't expect her to return to a normal life after such serious trauma. Detectives worked tirelessly to track down the perpetrator who attacked Diana. After her baby passed away, the case was classified as a homicide, and the local police department put all their resources into it. Despite Kevin providing an alibi, detectives didn't rush to rule him out as a suspect. His story raised numerous questions due to his argument with his wife, leaving the front door unlocked, and being absent for an extended period for a supposed quick trip to the fast food joint. His claim of seeing a suspicious man near the house in the middle of the night also seemed too convenient, but there was no evidence against Kevin. The police already had another suspect when crimes with a similar modus operandi had started happening in Tustin and its surrounding areas about a year before. In December 1978, an unknown perpetrator broke into the apartment of a 17-year-old girl, struck her with a piece of wood, and sexually assaulted her, resulting in her death. 4 months later, the same happened to a 21-year-old woman. Someone broke into her home, struck her with a piece of wood, and she didn't survive either. In July 1979, the unknown perpetrator entered another woman's apartment and did the same, but she managed to survive. However, the victim spent several weeks in a coma due to her injuries, and her subsequent testimony didn't lead detectives to finding the attacker. In September 1979, less than a month before Diana's attack, the same happened to a 31-year-old woman who died the next day. Her son provided investigators with a description of the assailant, but the man still couldn't be identified. All these crimes had important similarities, similar to the attack on Diana. Police were almost sure that they were dealing with a serial killer, and they were putting all their effort into catching this person. He had already been given a nickname, the Bedroom Basher, as the criminal was committing his crimes with short breaks and was active in a relatively small suburban area of Los Angeles. Detectives thought he might strike again soon, so they decided to use the media to warn all women who lived alone, especially those in lower-floor apartments, as they seemed to be the preferred targets of the suspected serial killer. This caused widespread panic. Women started buying any form of protection they could find, enrolling in self-defense classes, and staying with friends and family in an effort to protect themselves from the dangerous criminal. Police also started patrolling the streets at night. Detectives interviewed anyone who could have had any connection to these crimes, and soon they received their first leads. Several neighbors of the victims reported seeing a suspicious white man with dark, thick hair near their houses. Although this description was quite superficial, police located several matching men and investigated them, but it led nowhere. But there was a serious problem. Diana couldn't speak or remember anything, and according to the doctors, her brain needed some time to recover, functioning at the level of a 6-year-old child. Around the same time, another attack happened in Tustin. An unknown assailant broke into the apartment of a 24-year-old woman, struck her several times with a piece of wood, and sexually assaulted her. Tragically, the victim died, and the police once again failed to catch the culprit. Diana spent several more days in the hospital, and her mind began to gradually return to normal. However, she had almost completely lost her memory and still couldn't recall even her parents. Doctors said her memory might eventually return, but warned her family not to recount anything to her and to allow her to remember everything on her own. Once her life-threatening condition passed, Diana was discharged from the hospital, and her family took her home. Since Kevin needed to work on the military base to pay the bills, they moved in with Diana's parents, who could care for her around the clock. 2 weeks later, another tragic attack occurred in the city with a similar modus operandi, and this time, the unknown assailant killed a 17-year-old girl. After being discharged from the hospital, Diana started attending physiotherapy, and her condition gradually improved. She still couldn't speak or remember what happened to her, but everything suddenly changed 6 weeks after the attack. During a physiotherapy session, the therapist brought up the attack and asked if Diana still couldn't remember who did it to her. To the doctor's surprise, Diana suddenly nodded and pointed to her wedding ring. When Diana's mother came to pick her up, the doctor told her about this, and the mother asked her daughter, "Was it Kevin who attacked you?" And Diana nodded. Right after that, her mother took her to the police station, where she spoke with the lead detective. He asked Diana a few more questions, and she confirmed that she suddenly remembered the moment of the attack, and the perpetrator was none other than her husband. The detective's perception of the case took a sharp turn. Initially, he and his team were convinced that Diana fell victim to the notorious serial offender behind the other assaults. However, new uncertainties arose. Was Kevin the bedroom basher? Residing in the vicinity of the incidents and fitting the description given by multiple witnesses, a white man with dark hair raised suspicions. Alternatively, did Kevin plot to eliminate his wife by masquerading as the elusive assailant? Given the striking similarities in the bedroom basher's modus operandi in each instance, such a scheme wouldn't have been challenging. Investigators put Kevin under surveillance to closely monitor his movements in the hopes of linking him to other attacks. Police spoke with Kevin's friends to gather more information about him. They discovered that Kevin's relationship with Diana was strained, characterized by frequent arguments. This was further confirmed by neighbors who often heard them yelling. Kevin's friends mentioned that he complained to them about Diana's reluctance to be intimate during the final months of her pregnancy. However, when speaking to detectives, Kevin portrayed his relationship with Diana as nearly flawless. Besides that, detectives couldn't gather any additional useful information. Kevin behaved quite normally. He went to work and came back home without lingering anywhere else and didn't raise any suspicions. The police received results from the lab showing and discovery. Along with the attacker's semen, they found skin particles with blood under Diana's nails. Specialists matched the attacker's blood type to Kevin's blood sample, confirming they were the same. This indicated that Kevin shared the same blood type as the person who attacked Diana. Based on this evidence, detectives formulated the most probable scenario of what occurred on that significant night. Kevin had indeed purchased burgers at a fast food establishment a few miles away from his home. The time on the receipt and the cashier's testimony verified his presence there. Consequently, the detective suspected that he might have assaulted Diana before leaving home, swiftly visited the fast food place to establish an alibi, thus explaining the prolonged 40-minute absence. Regarding motive, detectives theorized that Diana's refusal to engage in intimacy served as the trigger for Kevin's violent actions. Despite Kevin's claim that they had sex hours before the incident, he frequently complained to friends about Diana's reluctance for months. Given the severity of the attack, detectives believe this was Kevin's breaking point. The police re-interviewed Diana, who confirmed she vividly remembered the attack and that Kevin was the one who assaulted her. During the conversation, her mother said they could no longer pretend and live under the same roof as Kevin after that. Detectives decided to arrest him and proceed with legal action. Kevin was arrested at a store to protect Diana's family and to avoid arresting him at their home. He denied the accusations, claiming his innocence. The court preparation lasted 10 months, during which Diana's health improved, allowing her to speak again, though with some difficulty. Multiple doctors confirmed her recovery and deemed her a credible witness. Diana testified in court, confirming that the person who attacked her that night was indeed her husband. Kevin's defense insisted on his innocence, trying to use the fast food alibi, but it wasn't enough against the victim's testimony. In November 1980, Kevin was found guilty of killing his child and assaulting his wife. He was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Regarding Kevin's possible involvement in other murders and assaults, detectives noticed something interesting before his arrest. 2 more similar crimes occurred in their county, but both victims survived, and the attacker's identity remained unknown. However, after Kevin's arrest, the attacks suddenly stopped. Before that, the bedroom basher committed his crimes quite frequently, sometimes with only a few weeks between them. But once Kevin was arrested, there were no more similar crimes. After the sentencing, Diana filed for divorce, and Kevin didn't try to object. Diana continued to work on her recovery, but it was quite challenging considering the injuries she sustained. Her brain almost returned to normal, but some problems remained with her forever. She partially lost her hearing and vision and still struggled to speak. As for Kevin, he continued to insist on his innocence for years. His time in prison wasn't easy, as other inmates repeatedly attacked him for killing a child, and he ended up in the hospital multiple times. When he had the opportunity to apply for parole, the commission denied it, and over the following years, he received 3 more denials. The main reason for these decisions was that Kevin had never admitted his guilt, which was seen as a lack of remorse. Now, detectives had the opportunity not only to determine if one person was behind all these crimes, but also possibly to identify them. Kevin remained the prime suspect, but when experts obtained the DNA profile of the perpetrator and added it to the database, there was an unexpected twist. All these samples matched another man named Gerald Parker. Parker was arrested in the same year as Kevin. He assaulted a 13-year-old girl in Tustin and was caught shortly after. At the time, detectives did not link this crime to the series of attacks because they had a different pattern. While the bedroom basher targeted victims late at night in their apartments, Parker abducted the girl on the street. Since then, Parker has been serving his sentence in prison and was set to be released in just a few days. After investigators obtained DNA matches for Parker in all the unsolved cases, they also remembered the attack on Diana, although this crime was considered solved. Detectives still considered its connection to the other similar cases highly likely. Now they understood that Kevin definitely wasn't the serial killer, leaving them with just one question: did he really attack his wife? During those years, Parker served at the same military base as Kevin and also owned a dark-colored van. As we recall, on the very first day, Kevin told the police that he saw an African-American man in front of their house walking near a dark van. This made detectives wonder, what if Parker was behind the attack on Diana? The local prosecutor visited Kevin in prison and informed him of the progress in the investigation of the Bedroom Basher murder series. He then asked Kevin to provide a direct sample of his DNA for analysis. Kevin, who had been trying to do this for years, immediately agreed. While experts conducted the analysis, detectives went to see Parker in prison. At that point, they hadn't yet charged him with the series of attacks because they needed time to prepare such a complex case. Nevertheless, the police decided to talk to the suspect, hoping he might give them a confession. Parker began to deny his involvement in the series of crimes, so detectives shifted the conversation to the attack on Diana. Before questioning him, they reviewed Parker's case and found something interesting. After his arrest for assaulting the girl, he told the police that military service was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Detectives decided to use this to their advantage and questioned how he could let another soldier take the blame for his crime. They continued pressing Parker, appealing to his loyalty to the military, until he suddenly said that another person was indeed serving time for the murder he committed. He continued admitting that on that night, he did indeed drive to Kevin's house in his van. His plan was to roam the neighborhood, peering into ground floor windows as he had done many times before, looking for his next victim. But this time he heard screams from Kevin and Diana's apartment, and a man came out onto the street. Parker noticed that he didn't lock the door, waited for a few minutes, then entered the apartment and assaulted Diana. He also said that he didn't know her husband since they had different duties on the military base. Parker also confessed to the other crimes, admitting to 6 murders and 3 non-lethal attacks. After the police obtained his confessions, DNA results proved Parker's involvement and Kevin's innocence. The prosecutor promised to overturn his sentence as soon as possible, and a few days later, Kevin walked free after spending 16 years behind bars. The twist in this case caused a widespread outcry. It wasn't just because an innocent man spent nearly half his life in prison for someone else's crime, but also because it took so long for the police to establish the real killer's identity. However, that wasn't the last twist in this case. When Kevin was released, the state of California agreed to pay him $10,000, which was a relatively small amount of money, even for those times. Several years later, he got additional compensation of $100 for each day spent in prison, totaling $620,000. But the story didn't end there. Despite Kevin's full exoneration, Diana refused to believe in his innocence. Up until that point, she had claimed Kevin was the only one who attacked her. After biological data from her body matched Parker's DNA, Diana came up with a new version of the stories. She claimed that on the night in question, Kevin attacked and assaulted her before leaving, and then Parker entered the apartment and did the same to her. Parker himself repeatedly stated that when he entered the apartment, the woman was simply lying on the bed without any visible injuries or signs of distress. He also claimed that he was the one who struck her on the head. Diana's family proposed another theory, suggesting that Kevin might have asked Parker to commit the crime, which is why he left the house that night, leaving the door open. However, Parker continued to insist that he didn't know Kevin. There were numerous people on the military base, many of whom didn't know each other personally. Besides, such a version would imply that Kevin should have known Parker was the serial killer to ask him something like that, which he vehemently denied. Kevin also denied any connection with Parker, insisting he would never harm Diana, let alone their unborn daughter. He maintained that he left the door unlocked simply because he didn't want to return for the keys right after the argument with his wife. He also added that he still blames himself for that decision. Diana insists on her version of events to this day, and there could be a simple explanation for that. The trauma she endured as a result of the attack had a profound impact on her brain. When she emerged from the coma, doctors warned all her relatives not to tell her what had happened, as her brain could accept any information as true, and she would believe such memories to be accurate and real. It's worth noting that even at the time of Kevin's release, 16 years after the incident, she continued to experience serious difficulties, such as struggling to process fast speech, indicating that the consequences of the trauma had an irreparable impact on her brain. It cannot be ruled out that the trauma is the primary reason for her conviction of Kevin's involvement. As for Parker, in 1999 he was sentenced to death, but this sentence has never been carried out. After many years of waiting in prison, California imposed a moratorium on executions, so Parker continues to serve his sentence behind bars to this day. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nathan Pate. On the night of December 1, 2010, Staff Sergeant Nathan Pate was in quite a rush. He was late for duty at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada. By strange coincidence, his alarm clock, which never failed to go off, didn't ring that day. Nathan woke up at 11 p.m. and woke up his wife, Michelle. He hurriedly took a shower, said goodbye to his family, then went to the garage. He was about to put on his uniform and start the car when suddenly loud shots rang out from behind him. Pate's children and wife came running at the sound. There, standing on the doorstep, was Nathan, bleeding and staggering from side to side. It was obvious he was about to fall. Michelle felt terrified and rushed toward her husband to help him up, but wasn't in time. The father of the family collapsed onto the floor. Around 11:30 p.m., 911 received a call. "My husband has been shot. He's bleeding. Help him." Mrs. Pate screamed into the phone. The dispatcher quickly explained how to administer first aid. Michelle tried giving artificial respiration to her spouse, but it didn't bring any relief. When rescuers arrived, they took him to the nearest hospital, where doctors did everything possible to save him. However, efforts weren't enough. They couldn't bring the young man back to life. The neck wound proved fatal for 28-year-old Nathan Pate. Upon being informed of her husband's death, Michelle's world shattered into before and after. An exemplary family man and valiant serviceman had been murdered right on his doorstep in Las Vegas. His death caused public outrage. Relatives, acquaintances, and concerned citizens demanded answers from the police. Who could commit such lawlessness? What were their motives? Was justice served? Nathan Joseph Villagomez Pate was born on February 12, 1982, in the village of Tamuning on Guam. Guam, a small island in the Pacific Ocean, is known for its paradisiacal beauty and historical past. Consequently, it is especially popular among tourists. Nathan was born in this amazing region and was fortunate to have a large and loving family. He had 3 brothers, Matthew, Anthony, Eric, and 1 sister, Carmela. The children were very friendly and helped their parents in everything. Nathan himself stood out from the others as he never caused trouble. He was a caring child at home and a diligent student at school. Nathan was very sociable, so he easily made friends. Brother Eric recalled that there was perhaps no one who did not want to communicate with him. Living near the ocean fostered Nathan's love for swimming from childhood, which later evolved into a passion for surfing. He spent all his free time on the beach, enjoying the sun and life. Nathan met his future wife during his studies at South High School, located in the neighboring town of Santa Rita. Michelle Anant Chuck was attracted to him at first sight. Young people began spending time together daily, and their affection for each other only grew stronger. They never parted. Together they studied at school, prepared for classes, and helped with household chores. Strong teenage friendship soon transformed into tender love. When Michelle was 16 years old, her family faced a terrible grief as her mother passed away. Consequently, Michelle spent all her free time helping her sister Melissa, the eldest of the Chuck family, who took on the role of mother and mistress of the house. Nathan supported her in everything she did and helped look after the younger children. In 2000, after graduation, Nathan decided to propose to Michelle, who happily accepted his proposal. Given their family's financial constraints preventing them from having a wedding ceremony, the couple received blessings from their parents to move in together instead. To earn a living, Nathan got a job as a receptionist at a local hotel. He earned a decent income, and there was enough money. However, like most young people, Nathan and Michelle were ambitious. They envisioned their own home and, soon, their son Dion was born into the Nathan family. Income then became insufficient to meet their expenses, prompting Nathan to consider a job that could offer his family a more secure existence. This aspiration led Nathan to join the Air Force. After graduation, he was assigned to Elmendorf Air Base in Anchorage, Alaska. After some time, the couple's dream came true when they built their own house. It was in this new home that their second child, a daughter named Niara, was born. Nathan saw success in his military career, which helped him fulfill ambitions that he and Michelle had previously been unable to achieve. Finally, 6 years after their engagement, they celebrated with a big wedding. My mom was extremely proud that her youngest son was the first to go out and achieve something, Eric said. In 2006, Nathan was transferred to Davis-Monthan Military Base in Arizona. He received a promotion to weapons loading team leader for the A-10 Thunderbolt attack aircraft of one of the Essex squadrons. During this time, he also trained in logistics and material management. Nathan definitely loved his job and performed it with dedication and good intentions. He was truly dedicated to his country. In 2007, Nathan and his family moved to Nellis Air Base near Las Vegas, Nevada. There, he took on the role of Assistant Junior Officer in charge of the supply section for maintenance of combat aircraft. Alongside his career progressions came family growth. Soon after moving, Nathan and Michelle welcomed 2 more sons, Dron and David. Michelle fell in love with Las Vegas. She believed it was an ideal place to live. To make her happy, Nathan decided they would settle down there permanently. Nathan selected the most suitable house for a large family, spacious and bright. Additionally, the future family home was conveniently located 30 to 40 minutes from the military base. Nathan made the down payment with his savings. The only task left was to manage the family's income and expenses wisely. Perhaps he could save some money temporarily, at least until Mr. Pat's next prospects materialized. Initially, Michelle was thrilled with her husband's surprise and set about organizing daily life in their new house. However, over time, their demands grew, and the family's expenditures exceeded Nathan's earnings. The joy of purchasing a new house began to diminish. It's well known that financial difficulties can strain relationships, and Nathan and Michelle were no exception. Realizing that the situation needed correction, Nathan enlisted as a volunteer in mid-2009 when the USA was at war with Iraq. His departure lasted 6 months, during which time the family's financial condition improved considerably. Nathan took solace in this improvement. After a short rest at home, Sergeant Pate decided to return to Iraq. While Nathan risked his life abroad, Michelle struggled with anxiety and intrusive thoughts about being alone with 4 children. Accustomed to a certain standard of living, she found it challenging to envision life differently. To distract herself from these worries, Mrs. Pate took a job at a corporate credit card telemarketing firm. Employment brought variety and new acquaintances into her routine and provided Michelle with her own safety net. Michelle didn't rule out starting her own business in the future and actively engaged in self-development by attending a school of aesthetics. Life went on as usual when Nathan was home. When he left, however, Michelle felt bored. The birth of their children, endless travels, and her husband's prolonged service had cooled their relationship significantly. With Nathan away for long periods and Michelle yearning for love and attention, their relationship faced undeniable challenges. She took a lover, who turned out to be her colleague, Michael Rudolph Rodriguez, a 31-year-old, good-looking local womanizer. Unfortunately, the man was also devious and dishonest. He had even spent time in 2007 in prison for forgery and attempted theft. Despite his background, Michelle couldn't resist Sweet Rudy, as they jokingly called him behind his back. By the end of 2009, Nathan returned home. The distance and the ordeal appeared to have strengthened their family relationship. However, this wasn't actually the case. Michelle was playing a double game. She did not want to lose her husband while having an infatuation on the side. She thus tried hard to please Nathan in every way possible. Nathan was fascinated by the changes in her appearance and character. The children, though, had been growing up without a father for a long time, which negatively impacted their education. Determined not to leave his family again for an extended period, Nathan did not suspect that Michelle's striking changes could be linked to infidelity. His own pure and faithful nature blinded him to this possibility. In Las Vegas, Nathan found a good way to earn more money, double pay by working night shifts and taking up private teaching. He developed training programs for simplified baseball catering to young children. Michelle's pretense didn't hold up for long. Once their standard of living began to fall, her attitude changed entirely and their problems escalated. By Thanksgiving in 2010, Brother Eric and his wife Veronica visited the young family and immediately sensed tension between them. They had changed beyond recognition. It seemed like all former feelings between Michelle and Nathan had completely vanished. The couple's issues were glaringly obvious. Not just personal, but also financial difficulties were evident from their almost empty pantry and refrigerator. A week later, on December 1, 2010, there was a peculiar communication between Mrs. Pate and Mr. Rodriguez at precisely 11:12 p.m. Michelle received a text message from Michael stating, "Hope you are feeling better." The man wrote, "Van Dyke's contract for tomorrow is almost finalized." 2 minutes later, he sent another text, "If you're not feeling well, let me. I'll give you a couple of days to rest. Remember, I appreciate your help." At 11:19 p.m., Michelle replied, "My husband just recently woke me up. Right now, he is trying to leave the house, but I think he's going to be late today. I'm sorry the contract is giving you so much trouble." A few months before the tragedy, Michelle had decided that she did not want to be with Nathan anymore. However, she also wasn't planning to leave him because she realized that breaking up would only lead to headaches and empty pockets. She thought, "I don't think he will forgive me and support me after the divorce." Michelle believed that alimony would hardly suffice for a normal life. Additionally, Mrs. Pate was aware of her husband's military insurance policy. In the event of his death, payments totaling approximately $6,500 were due to be made to her. These troubling thoughts plagued Michelle's troubled mind until one day she confided in Michael about them. To her surprise, Michael was intrigued by her thoughts. Consequently, the terrible idea from Nathan's former lover transformed into a devious plan. Mr. Rodriguez knew they couldn't execute this plan alone, as it was too complicated. Hence, he enlisted his friend Corey Alexis Hawkins into their criminal scheme. The 33-year-old mercenary had about 9 convictions, each related to theft or fraud. Corey was a hardened criminal and agreed to assist on the condition of a substantial reward. He estimated his participation at $20,000. After much deliberation, Michelle and Michael agreed to his terms. Subsequently, a couple more individuals joined their group: 23-year-old Jessica Austin, Corey's girlfriend, and her friend Shannon. Jessica's friend Shannon was not particularly intelligent. She earned a living by starring in adult films. Shannon was offered 5% of Corey and Jessica's cut for her assistance in the scheme. This lucrative offer quickly enticed her. The initial plan involved shooting Nathan in his Chevrolet Tahoe and then carrying his body in the car to leave it in the parking lot of one of the apartment complexes. Jessica needed to gather the essential items for the criminal act: men's gloves, a car cover, and a fragrance. Shannon's role was to provide Michael with an alibi. She had to confirm that Michael was by her side on the day of the murder, December 1st, 2010. On that day, Michelle felt unwell and deviated from her usual routine by coming home at about 5:30 p.m. Typically, Michelle's classes at beauty school ended late, around 10:40 p.m. Mrs. Pate arrived home just 5 minutes before Nathan left for work on that unfortunate day. Michelle found her husband sleeping on the sofa. She woke him and suggested they go upstairs together. He did not object, and that was their last night as a couple. Nathan, late for work, went downstairs while Michelle was corresponding with Michael. To avoid suspicion, they used code words in their communications. Michael and his accomplice were stationed in a black Cadillac SRX parked near the victim's house. The perpetrators wore latex gloves to avoid leaving any traces. Knowing the sergeant's military training could be advantageous for Nathan, Michael opted for a surprise attack. He approached Nathan from behind and shot him 5 times in the back. Afterward, Michael quickly exited the garage, got into his car, and fled the scene. The perpetrators then retreated to a prearranged location where they burned their clothes in a fireplace and disposed of other evidence. Following this, Michael and Shannon went to a hotel to establish an alibi. Meanwhile, Jessica meticulously cleaned the apartment where they had stayed. Emergency services and police officers arrived at the crime scene and were shocked by what had transpired. The neighborhood where the Pate family resided was typically seen as model territory. Detective Todd Williams initially chose to inspect the shooting scene. He found the garage door unlocked. There was a noticeable odor of iron inside the room. Blood was smeared on the walls and in the traces of it were also visible on the floor. Next to Nathan's uniform were his keys and wallet. Since the valuables were untouched, a robbery murder was ruled out. After examining the scene, Detective Lori Anderson decided to talk to the victim's wife. Michelle explained what had happened. For some reason, she added that the family was struggling financially. This gave the police some ideas. Maybe Nathan was hiding something from his wife, perhaps a gambling addiction, debts, or an affair on the side. At least that would have cleared up the attack. Besides, all the evidence pointed to Nathan being deliberately set up. The police examined the victim's cell phone. It contained only pictures of his wife and children. This convinced the officers that Mr. Pate was a decent man. The investigation continued. The next step in the search for the perpetrator was to canvass the neighborhood. Statistically speaking, there's always someone who saw or heard something. This was indeed true for Nathan. Some neighbors reported seeing a car parked near the house. The car was driven by a man wearing a brown sweatshirt. After shots were fired, the vehicle immediately drove away. Detectives finally had a lead. Nathan's family was shocked to learn what had happened. They caught the first flight out of Guam, waiting for answers. His mother, Carmelita Pate, cried throughout the journey. The woman couldn't believe her son had died so early in life. When they finally reached Nathan's home, Michelle threw herself into her mother-in-law's arms and then lost consciousness. Nathan's mother sensed something unnatural in her daughter-in-law's reaction. For some reason, it seemed faked. The investigators decided to talk to Mrs. Pate again and asked her about the car witnesses had seen nearby. Unexpectedly, she said her colleague Michael Rodriguez had a similar car. Why Michelle gave out this information remains unclear. Police later determined that Michelle had either inadvertently revealed the truth or that the perpetrator's plan was flawed. Detectives then investigated Michael's identity and found that his criminal record heightened their suspicions. He was brought in for questioning, and he responded calmly. Mr. Rodriguez stated that on the day of Nathan's murder, around 9 p.m., he went shopping at a supermarket. During this outing, he met an interesting woman named Shannon. According to him, they had a lengthy conversation and decided to continue their acquaintance at a hotel room. Michael explained that they arrived at the hotel around 11 p.m. To verify Michael's testimony, the officers contacted Shannon. She did confirm their romantic encounter. However, the detective had a feeling something was amiss. The next logical step was to examine the information found in Michelle's phone. Specialists managed to recover correspondence between Michelle and Michael spanning over a year. Their communication turned out to be very suspect. On the exact day of Nathan's murder, the couple discussed a contract with someone named Van DJ. The conversation resembled code rather than a straightforward business negotiation. It seemed like how they planned the crime. Investigators were nearly certain both individuals were involved, but lacked sufficient evidence to detain them longer, so they decided to release Michael until more details could be clarified. After examining Michelle's cell phone, detectives called her back for questioning. She appeared visibly agitated and seemed to be withholding information. Realizing that officers knew more than she wanted them to know, Michelle eventually disclosed her affair with Michael. A little later, she confessed that several months before her husband's death, she and her lover had plotted to kill Nathan. The motive behind this action was apparently tied to insurance payments. Mrs. Pate justified herself by stating that she had repented and claimed she changed her mind during one stage of preparing for the crime. She felt sorry for her husband and even tried to interfere with the plan by turning off his alarm clock. Michelle was counting on her accomplice, not waiting for Nathan or missing him. However, the investigators did not believe in the woman's remorse. Her correspondence eloquently testified otherwise. Additionally, she sent Michael a cute smiley face right after she learned of her husband's death. After a while, Shannon came to the police station to confess. The woman must have realized her predicament. Nonetheless, her involvement in the case was clearly embellished. She explained that Michael had forced her to provide an alibi. Jessica asked for my help. Her friends wanted to teach a big drug dealer a lesson. My job was only to cover up the involvement of one of the attackers. I thought it would be a way to get justice, she explained. She then added that on the night of the attack, Michael told her the whole truth. As soon as I realized I was being used, I immediately went to the police. In addition, I feared for my life. There is no telling what they would have done to me. The woman's words were confirmed by the hotel's CCTV footage that showed Michael and Shannon arrived at the hotel not at 11 p.m., as Michael himself said, but at 11:40 p.m., her testimony led detectives to Corey and Jessica. Corey had long denied any involvement in the case. He knew what a guilty plea would do to a repeat offender, but Jessica did reveal her role in the sinister plan. To honor the young sergeant's memory, Nathan's family and friends gathered on December 7, 2010, in the chapel at Nellis Base. Michelle decided to skip the ceremony. She was clearly not in the mood for it. In his speech, Eric Pate recalled, "My brother has always been an example for me and the rest of my family. Nathan truly loved life. He was devoted to his wife and children. Everything he did was for his homeland, love, and friends." On December 9th, the remains of Nathan were transported to Guam. On December 15th, a requiem mass took place at St. Francis Church in Tamuning. Military honors were paid at the Pai City Cemetery on Guam's island. His funeral? The cortege consisted of 36 motorcycles. 6 officers carried a casket draped with a U.S. flag upon arrival at the burial site. Afterward, 21 shots echoed in the sky as Nathan was given a hero's farewell. Michael Rodriguez, Corey Hawkins, and Jessica Austin were arrested without bail on December 8, 2010. The next day, Michaela Pate met the same fate. Police feared for her mental state and placed her under surveillance to prevent suicide. On January 4, 2011, in Clark County District Court, charges were read to the four accomplices: conspiracy to commit murder and robbery with a firearm, murder with a firearm. Additionally, Michael and Corey faced charges for possessing firearms. The trials dragged on for 3 years as some defendants denied involvement. Armed with strong defense teams, they filed multiple motions aiming to exclude certain evidence from the case, yet each motion got rejected. Their strategies only delayed inevitable punishment by postponing sessions repeatedly. On September 21, 2015, the trial for Nathan Pate's murder began. Michael Rudolph Rodriguez stood trial first and pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. On September 29, 2015, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. An appeal against this sentence got denied later. At sentencing time, Michael showed no emotion or regret for his crime. Michaela Pate's trial happened 1 month later in a Las Vegas courtroom, a stark contrast as she insisted that she had reconsidered killing her husband. When the judge permitted Michaela to speak a few words in her defense, turned to the parents of the murdered man. With tears in her eyes, she apologized them. "I loved Nathan and our children. I was very confused and made a big mistake," Michaela stated, then fainted once again. The prosecutor asserted that she did not believe the defendant intended to thwart the conspiracy, citing considerable evidence to the contrary. It baffled everyone how a woman, a mother of 4 children, could become so cold-blooded. The judge sided with the prosecution, determining that Michaela was clearly more involved in the crime than she admitted in court. Michaela soon pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder and first-degree murder with a firearm. This plea helped her avoid capital punishment. The Pate family also requested that the court not impose the death penalty on their former relative. At the end of the hearing, the judge described Michaela's crime as incomprehensible and unfathomable. In October 2015, it was Corey Alexis Hawkins' turn in court. He also agreed to a plea bargain to avoid the death penalty and was sentenced to life in prison. His attorney's petition for parole was denied because Corey had helped plan the crime and was present at the time of the shooting. Jessica Austin likewise took a plea deal with prosecutors and later faced charges of conspiracy to commit murder. In March 2016, during Michaela's final sentencing, she cited her unstable emotional state as leading her to commit the crime once more and asked Nathan's family for forgiveness again. Carmelita Pete, who was deeply religious, recognized that her former daughter-in-law felt genuine remorse for her actions and believed that Michaela's soul needed forgiveness. Thus, Nathan's mother forgave Michaela in the courtroom. She added afterward that Michaela had already endured substantial punishment by losing contact with her children, who feared their mother might harm them too. Erichet informed her of this perspective. He believed Michaela was deeply shaken by her mother-in-law's words. Her family is now moving on without her, and the children will up knowing their mother is a murderer. Eric's wife, Veronica, also felt the need to speak out. She told Michaela that she hated her and then added that Michaela dishonored the family name with her greed and love for a man she barely knew. Michaela had destroyed her own family. She became the murderer of the man she once loved immensely, with whom she shared a home and future. Could Michaela have ever imagined how her unchecked ambition would turn out? Hardly. People in this category often live in a perpetual pursuit of happiness without appreciating what they already have. Nathan, unlike Michaela, spent his whole life giving selflessly. Despite being sleep-deprived and risking his health and life, he fulfilled his beloved's dreams, yet never found recognition from her. The children of the Pate family will remain traumatized for life. It's doubtful they will be able to create strong families or socialize effectively. The painful experience of their parents' predicament will stay before their eyes forever. On the morning of February 19, 2020, as the first light began to brighten the street and silence settled throughout the city, a man was thoughtfully cleaning his car. Suddenly, loud screams pierced the quiet. His heart raced as he turned to see a nearby car coming to an abrupt stop. In the front seat sat a visibly pale and frightened woman, screaming hysterically, while the man beside her remained calm and composed. The man approached the car. Tension filled the air, ready to explode. Then, a deafening bang echoed through the morning, followed by a flash of light, like lightning tearing through silence. Thick smoke and fire obscured the sky. After what felt like an eternity, he came to his senses amid chaos. He saw a woman engulfed in flames, screaming in agony. Panicking, he grabbed a hose in a desperate attempt to douse the fire, but it continued to spread relentlessly. What was meant to be an ordinary day transformed into a nightmare where flames and fear dominated. What led them to this horrific scenario? When did normality morph into such tragedy? Hannah Clark was a vivacious 31-year-old woman who brought energy to everyone around her. Yet her fate took a dark turn, resulting in irreversible loss that shattered her life. She courageously faced off against a man whose name was once engraved in her heart, but paid an immense price for this confrontation. This tragic event occurred in Camp Hill, located in eastern Brisbane, Australia, a serene town where once vibrant life vanished abruptly, leaving behind only memories of its past vibrancy. Hannah Clark entered the world on September 8, 1988. By 2020, she was a devoted mother to 3 children, 2 delightful girls and 1 spirited boy. However, her family faced challenging times. When Aaliyah, 6 years old, Liana, 4, and Trey was just 3, Hannah left an indelible impression of her warmth and cheerful disposition in the hearts of those who loved her. Her entire family remembers her as an exceptionally gentle and kind spirit with a radiant smile that could brighten any room. She dedicated herself entirely to her children, giving them everything they needed. Together with her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, a rugby player from the New Zealand Warriors, they raised their children. Despite a significant age gap between them, their relationship quickly grew deep and strong. Yet Sue Clark, Hannah's mother, never fully trusted Rowan. Hannah chose to ignore her mother's reservations about him. People around Rowan often spoke poorly of him. He had trouble remembering even his 4-digit bank card PIN and neglected to register his car after purchasing it, claiming no one had informed him about the necessity of such formalities. Hannah's parents were burdened with despair. Confronted with this difficult situation, they realized that interfering in Hannah's relationship with Rowan might lead to them losing their bond with her altogether. Their hearts were heavy, but they decided not to fight against it to preserve their cherished connection, the love and trust of their daughter. Sue had concerns about Rowan from the beginning. She sensed something amiss about him. He appeared arrogant and self-centered. The considerable age difference troubled her as well. When they met, Hannah had just graduated, while Rowan was already an adult at 31 years old. The fact that he hadn't finalized his divorce when they first began dating added to their worries. When presented with this situation upon meeting Rowan for the first time, Hannah's parents inquired about his ex-wife's circumstances. Rowan explained he still lived with her due to obligations towards his son. Eventually, though, Rowan finalized his divorce and continued pursuing a relationship with Hannah despite initial concerns from those closest to her. In 2011, he proposed to her, and Hannah yes. A year later, they married in Kingsley, New South Wales, Australia. They had 3 children together. The eldest daughter, Aaliyah, was quick-witted and inherited the best qualities from her mother, according to her grandmother's stories. Liana, the middle daughter, was a charming child who aspired to be the center of attention and always pleased those around her. The youngest child was Trey, perhaps the most beloved. Hannah adored him. He also showed athletic talent, which brought great joy to his parents who were involved in sports. Rowan was a former professional athlete who loved working out at the gym. He had impressive muscles, though their origin was not related to hard work, but to steroids use. This led to a mental disorder for him. Like Hannah, Rowan worked as a personal trainer, though their methods differed greatly. Clients loved Hannah for her kindness and caring nature. Because of this, she had many regular customers. Rowan's approach as a trainer was fundamentally different. His inappropriate and aggressive behavior, caused by steroids, made him unsuitable as a trainer. For example, he would call clients fat and clumsy on social media and often insult women during training sessions. Rowan faced difficulties in communicating with people, which affected his career and financial situation significantly. Hannah had to take on the role of breadwinner in the family. This only irritated Rowan even more because he felt humiliated that his wife was doing a better job than he was. Despite financial difficulties, they decided to open their own fitness club together. In between training sessions, they both worked part-time at a sports store, a decision made by Rowan so he could control Hannah's every move and know her whereabouts always. Their story is marked by contrast. While one shone through kindness and empathy, the other struggled with aggression and challenges in communication. However, his conduct in the store mirrored his behavior in the gyms where he previously worked. It seemed that Baxter consistently sought to display his superiority over women. During a personal training session with Sue, Hannah's mother, Rowan revealed a more malicious side. Instead of demonstrating the expected respect for the club owner and his mother-in-law, he acted inappropriately. During the session, Rowan deliberately caused Sue to fall. She struck her head on the floor and began to bleed. In such circumstances, any reasonable person would have apologized and promptly assisted her. But Rowan was different. He not only showed no empathy, but also laughed cynically at Sue and made sarcastic remarks about her clumsiness throughout the remainder of the training. Despite this incident and their own reservations, Hannah's parents endeavored to accept Rowan for their daughter's sake. Personal training sessions with Baxter became torturous for clients. Insults like fat and lazy were frequently directed at them. At home, his tyranny extended to Hannah and their children. Over time, his insults grew more cutting. He punished Hannah for any misbehavior, anything that displeased him. He forbade the children from seeing Sue, their grandmother, and prohibited Hannah from communicating with her brother. Hannah found herself isolated and severed from family and friends. Rowan exercised absolute control over her life, including taking away her clients and dictating who she could see and when. Gradually, she became akin to a prisoner within her own home. Each day, Rowan demanded intimacy from Hannah. Any refusal provoked his anger, which he then directed at her and the children. After coercing her into compliance, he would smile insincerely and offer a false apology, attributing it to an outburst of passion. In isolation and under constant control and cruelty, Hannah's spirit began to diminish. Rowan's tyranny was affecting both her life and those of her children adversely. The marriage that once thrived on love had devolved into a living nightmare for them all. Hannah lived under immense fear, imprisoned by unseen but potent bonds. Rowan, a tyrant and a brute, sought her obedience through threats and violence. His words pierced her heart like venomous thorns. "If you don't obey, I will hurt you." The specter of his wrath haunted the house, tainting each day. Hannah's environment was a cage of prohibitions put up by her husband. Wearing short shorts or bright colors, symbols of freedom and self-expression, was strictly forbidden to her. Rowan could not bear for his wife, whom he considered his property, to attract attention. He believed her place was in the shadows, away from prying eyes. Hannah did not dare to defy him. Any attempt at self-expression aroused his fury and rage. The insults and bullying extended beyond just Hannah. Rowan often directed undue harshness towards the children. While playful games among parents and children are common, Rowan frequently crossed all boundaries, inflicting intentional harm on them. When they cried out in pain, he mocked them, showing no regard for their feelings. Once, a playful fight with Aaliyah escalated into tragedy. Rowan miscalculated his strength and deliberately pushed the girl. She hit her head severely. The injury was deep enough to require hospitalization and stitches. Instead of consoling his daughter and apologizing for his aggression, Rowan blamed Aaliyah. This wasn't the only form of torment he inflicted on his children. As an athlete accustomed to ice baths post-training, a standard regimen for adults, Rowan forced even little Trey to endure the icy water despite their pleas and tears. He even posted photos and videos of them on social media with captions like, "Even my kids take ice baths." Remarkably perceptive despite their youth, the children understood their predicament well. Aaliyah, the eldest daughter known for her quick wit and resilience, often argued with Rowan and tried to resist his tyranny. Whenever she overheard her parents arguing, she intervened in an effort to shield her mother from Rowan's ire. Feeling suffocated by Rowan's oppressive control, like a stranglehold on her soul, Hannah recognized that the toxic atmosphere was harming not just herself, but also the children profoundly. She decided to take a critical step, confronting her husband head-on despite knowing his cruel tendencies well. She understood that he might use the children against her in his ruthless mannerisms. Hannah did not believe he was capable of physically harming them. However, the fear of being denied the chance to see them tormented her greatly. She was a dedicated mother, willing to do anything for her children, yet she felt trapped. A single misstep could result in losing the most precious thing, the bond with her beloved children. In that same year, Hannah experienced a life-altering event. Rowan developed an interest in jiu-jitsu. One day, after returning from training fueled by adrenaline, he unexpectedly attacked Hannah. His hands tightened around her throat, and chilling words escaped his mouth. Overwhelmed by fear, Hannah did not immediately recognize herself as a victim of domestic violence. This assault was far more terrifying than anything she had previously endured. In the aftermath, Hannah resolved to leave Rowan Baxter at the earliest opportunity. When she contacted the police, she detailed the horrors she had endured. The responding officer informed her that coerced intimacy without consent constitutes domestic violence. This conversation was pivotal for Hannah. It opened her eyes and motivated her to take immediate action. She took her children and sought refuge at her parents' home, determined to escape the nightmare that shadowed them. By early November 2019, their relationship had not yet legally concluded in divorce. During this period, Hannah decided to allow Rowan some time with their children, despite having little control over the situation without court intervention. Nonetheless, she understood that trusting Rowan with the children was precarious at best. Rowan struggled with his emotions and perhaps sought solace by consulting Pastor Christopher Ans from his church. Christopher, known for his kindness and willingness to listen, provided Rowan with support and counsel during this challenging time. Over time, Christopher began to observe unsettling characteristics in Rowan. He noticed Rowan's desire for dominance and control. In moments of vulnerability, Rowan confided in Christopher, admitting his awareness of the illegality of his actions and his need for assistance. However, he had no idea how to remedy the situation. This confession marked the initial step towards reformation. Christopher's support and wise advice could have been beneficial on this challenging path, but it did not transpire. One day, Hannah and her children were walking quietly down the street when, without warning, a terrible event occurred. Rowan suddenly appeared, seized Liana, their middle daughter, and disappeared. Hannah's world fell apart. Intense anxiety and fear for her daughter's safety overwhelmed her. For 2 days, she was unable to locate Liana and had no knowledge of her whereabouts. The growing anxiety became unbearable torture. Eventually, Hannah sought assistance from the police. The officers conducted a thorough search and fortunately located Liana with her father. The girl was found alive and unharmed, although the experience left an indelible mark on her psyche. Recognizing the imminent danger to Hannah and her children, the police strongly recommended she file a formal report against him and obtain a protection order. However, Hannah, paralyzed by grief and fear, was not able to take this crucial step. Despite the numerous issues caused by Rowan, he was unfortunately still awarded joint custody of the children. This legal leverage enabled him to persist in his abuse of Hannah. Following another visitation with their father, the children were returned to Hannah's parents. Before departing, Rowan attempted to humiliate Hannah by displaying photographs of her in her underwear near his car where their children could see them. Overcome with anger, Hannah tried to retrieve these photos, but Rowan responded violently. He grabbed her shoulder, twisted her arm, and struck her in the face, resulting in a split lip. It remains unknown how severe this assault might have become if Sue, Hannah's mother, had not intervened promptly to assist her daughter. In response to intervention and shouting insults, Baxter drove away hastily. Hannah, gripped by shock and despair, went to the police because this attack clearly violated her protection order. Sadly, the authorities didn't act swiftly, which resulted in a heartbreaking tragedy. The day started out as usual and seemed like it would just be another working day. But there was an underlying sense of destiny. On February 19, 2020, clutching her car keys with hopes of a peaceful morning, Hannah left her parents' house to take her 3 children to school and kindergarten. Yet fate had other intentions. Minute by minute, moment by moment, disaster loomed over Hannah and her children's lives. Like a magnet drawing them inescapably into darkness, they were pulled towards it. When Hannah got into the car with her children, Baxter unexpectedly climbed in as well. Fear gripped Hannah for herself and her children. She pleaded with Rowan to leave them alone, but his unchecked rage filled the air with threats and demands for Hannah to start driving. Not wanting to escalate the situation, she obeyed. As Hannah turned onto Raven Street, she noticed a man cleaning his car nearby. In what seemed an ordinary moment, fate took a sudden turn towards catastrophe. Desperate for vengeance, Rowan grabbed a canister of gasoline from under the seat and doused Hannah and her children with it. Michael Zach was an accidental witness to this scene. He later recounted hearing the sound of a car pulling up to his house that morning. Panicked, Hannah screamed for help at him. She begged that Rowan wanted to kill her and had covered them all in gasoline. Rowan, holding tightly to Hannah, didn't let her go for a moment. His desperate cries for help got lost in a storm of silent madness. Michael approached the car from the passenger side and encountered a harrowing sight. Rowan's blank expression and the lighter he held. In an instant, flames engulfed the vehicle, a burst so intense it chilled the blood. Screams echoed, ears ringing, and then there was silence. The explosion left Michael stunned, disoriented, and pulled him out of reality itself. When he regained awareness, he was initially unsure of his surroundings or what had transpired. All around him lay chaos. The acrid smell of burnt metal and gasoline filled the air. Flames ravaged the car, reducing it to charred remains. Amazingly, Hannah managed to escape the blaze, scorched and bloody but alive. She screamed frantically, "My children! Where are my children?" Pleas for help poured out, not for herself, but for her children, still in danger within the burning inferno. As if answering her desperate cries, a passing car stopped. A doctor, off duty but compelled by conscience, rushed towards her. Upon reaching Hannah, he heard her anguished cry, "My children, they're there. Why didn't I stay with them?" That single phrase captured all her world's pain and despair. She was torn apart by regret and self-recrimination for surviving when her children did not. With professional composure and urgency, the doctor endeavored to assist amid the turmoil surrounding them both. Michael didn't hesitate for a second. Grabbing the hose at his house, he began pouring water over the burning car. The fire was ruthless, though. It consumed the entire vehicle with no hope of saving the children. Both the doctor and Michael started shouting for Hannah to duck and hide to put out the fire, but in her grief, she didn't hear them. "My children! Where are my children?" she cried out, her words filled with desperation and madness. In those first terrible moments after the explosion, Michael didn't notice the children inside. It was hard for him to believe Hannah would put them in such danger. Only later, when her screams finally made sense to him, did his heart fill with chilling horror. He raced toward the car to rescue them, but the flames were too fierce, the heat unbearable. All efforts were futile. Hannah lay on the road, her body scorched by fire, repeatedly saying, "My children, someone save my children." No one yet grasped the tragedy's full scale. Burns covered more than 97% of her body. Only her feet remained untouched. the only unaffected place on her severely burned body. Despite unimaginable pain, Hannah couldn't stop thinking about her unprotected children. Indeed, those who had always said Hannah was selfless were proven right. The police looked at her burned body and knew survival chances were slim. Yet, Hannah did not accept that fate easily. A courageous fire in her heart allowed her to summon every last bit of strength to give a testimony to police officers, a final gesture before facing an awful death. Officer Angus Kay wrote down every word she managed to say. Through pain and despair, she tried describing events that led up to her tragedy. Hannah, struggling to move her lips, identified her ex-husband, Rowan Baxter, as the individual responsible and relayed all the details. Her voice grew softer by the minute, and her frail body weakened further. Officer Key stayed by her side throughout. He commended her for her bravery and reassured her that she had already contributed significantly and everything would be all right. His actions would later receive high praise from the authorities. His professionalism was crucial in gathering materials that became key to a verdict. Even in her final moments, Hannah didn't fully grasp the horror unfolding around her. When questioned about previous threats from Rowan, she denied any such instances. Doctors came to alleviate her pain, but she could no longer speak. Amidst all this chaos, Rowan Baxter behaved oddly. Despite burns covering 80% of his body, he exited the car on his own. While Hannah pleaded for her children's safety, he sat on the road, staring at the burning vehicle. After some time, Rowan, seemingly possessed, climbed back into the car engulfed in flames. One of the bystanders, risking his own life, attempted to extinguish the fire at the rear of the vehicle. At that moment, Rowan retrieved a knife from inside the car and drove people away from it, preventing them from extinguishing the blaze. The children, trapped in a dire situation of steel and flames, had virtually no chance of survival. Nonetheless, onlookers did not cease their efforts to rescue them. Rowan's actions kept everyone at bay, effectively sentencing his children to a painful demise. What drove him? Was it a desperate attempt to shield them from an inevitable fate or an act of madness clouded by selfishness? One witness made an effort to reason with Rowan, pleading for him to drop the knife and allow a chance for the children's rescue. However, Rowan was unresponsive. As the children perished and Hannah succumbed before his eyes, Baxter turned the knife on himself. His selfish act eradicated any remaining hope for everyone involved. The children died. Hannah followed shortly thereafter, and Rowan's motives remained shrouded in mystery. At this tragic scene, a senior doctor noted Hannah's valor. Observing her wounds, which were clearly fatal, he saw only her concern for the children's welfare and a desire to convey the truth in her eyes. Hannah Clark passed away at the hospital on the very same day of her admission. Only 31 years old, she was a tragic of severe domestic violence, along with her children. Despite facing immense danger, Hannah tirelessly fought to protect her family from an abusive individual. Her courageous efforts, although ultimately unsuccessful, demonstrated her steadfast resolve. Each day, she exhibited remarkable bravery, putting her loved one's safety above all else. Through her relentless effort to confront her harrowing circumstances, she ensured that her story would endure. On March 9, 2020, Hannah was laid to rest alongside her children. This event deeply affected the Clark family. In their grief, they decided to establish the Small Steps for Hannah Foundation with the mission of ending domestic violence in Australia. Just 4 days after this heart-wrenching event, thousands gathered to bid farewell to Hannah and her children. Hannah's memory will live on in Camp Hill through Hannah's House, where new trees were planted and a plaque installed recounting her life story. Through these initiatives and remembrances, Hannah's legacy persists for future generations to honor and remember. In December 2020, Hannah Clark was recognized as the Woman of the Year by Marie Claire. This honor celebrated her courage in battling domestic violence. Yet her story continues beyond this recognition. Although Baxter is no longer alive, police have not closed the case. Their aim now is to delve into his motives to prevent similar tragic events from happening again. Those who knew Rowan describe him as egocentric and violent. Nicole, a friend of Hannah's, expressed her strong frustration. She spoke to the police, criticizing their inaction and negligence. Why wasn't help given to Hannah? Why were the children not saved? These questions remain unanswered for now, but one thing is evident. Rowan Baxter's selfishness led to a devastating tragedy. It left behind only grief and unresolved questions that will haunt many. Hannah's mother shared harrowing details of what her daughter suffered due to Baxter's influence. She recalled an incident at the gym where Rowan intentionally dropped Hannah on the floor, highlighting his aggressive nature further. A pastor who conversed with Baxter also noted his controlling tendencies and lack of empathy toward others. Pain. On January 26, 2020, investigators discovered a note left by Baxter just before the tragic incident. In this note, Baxter expressed that he considered himself a victim. He wrote, "I can't take this anymore. She must understand how hard it is to not have to see my own children. My life is ruined." Notably, Baxter signed the note on his own behalf and seemingly on behalf of the children. This detail underscores his perception of himself as a victim and his accusation against Hannah for ruining his life. The content of this note made Baxter's intentions evident. It appears he may have had plans to kidnap the children and retaliate against Hannah. During the court hearing, it was revealed that a week before the tragedy, on February 13, 2020, Hannah had alerted her friends about potential danger from Baxter. Her friend, Nicole Brooks, contacted the police on her behalf to warn them that Hannah and her children were at risk. Regrettably, the police did not take these concerns seriously, stating there was no specific threat they could act upon. Despite Nicole's persistent efforts, her warnings went unheeded. This situation exemplifies how inadequate laws to protect women from domestic violence can result in tragedy. Had stricter regulations been in place, perhaps the authorities could have responded more swiftly and effectively, potentially preventing the loss of Hannah and her children's lives. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Vanessa Marcotte. Vanessa Theresa Marcotte was born on June 17, 1989, in Leominster, Massachusetts, where she developed a strong academic foundation. She went on to graduate summa laude from Boston University in 2011, earning a bachelor's degree in communications. Following her graduation, she secured a job at WordStream, an online marketing software startup in Boston. Later, she advanced her career by becoming an account manager at Google's New York City office. Whenever possible, Vanessa would visit her mother and aunt in Princeton, a small rural town with a population of around 4,000, located in another state. As an only child, her mother Rosanna cherished these opportunities and looked forward to spending time with her daughter, who made it a point to visit every 2 months or so. On Sunday, August 7, 2016, at 1 p.m., Vanessa left her mother's house on Brook Station Road to go for a run and then take the commuter bus back to New York. She chose a familiar area for her run. When she failed to return after several hours, her mother contacted the police. The officers immediately started searching the area where Vanessa was supposed to have lost. Her mother, Rosanna, became concerned about Vanessa's unusual and prolonged absence, so she asked the police for help. This case gained significant national media attention because it was rare in Princeton, where no similar incident had occurred in the past 30 years. Furthermore, just a few days earlier, a similar incident involving 30-year-old Karina Vitrano, a runner and fitness blogger, had happened in a New York City neighborhood. At 8:20 p.m., a police dog traced a scent and led the search team to a densely vegetated area, about 60 yards from the road and less than a mile from Vanessa's mother's home. There, they found the body of a woman, quickly identified as Vanessa Marcotte. A preliminary examination of the body revealed that her death was a criminal act. She had been stripped of her clothes, and there were burn marks on her legs, hands, and face. The body was discovered in a secluded area, surrounded only by woods and a road, with no houses nearby. Notably, Vanessa's cell phone and headphones were missing, despite an extensive police search. It is believed that the perpetrator intentionally took these items to prevent leaving behind any DNA evidence. Next to the body, a sneaker with burn marks was found on the grass, and similar burn marks were discovered at other locations. Detectives deduced that the perpetrator used gasoline in an attempt to destroy DNA traces. A forensic examination revealed that Vanessa died from strangulation, and her fierce struggle for life led to the discovery of unknown DNA under her fingernails. The discovery that Vanessa's clothes had been removed clarified the motive behind the crime. Medical examiners detected signs of male involvement and analyzed DNA samples, but the results yielded no matches in either local or national databases. Authorities urged residents of Princeton and neighboring areas to remain vigilant and cautious, encouraging anyone with information or suspicions to contact the Massachusetts State Hotline or the Princeton Police Department. Worcester District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. announced at a press conference on August 11th that the perpetrator was likely a male who sustained minor injuries, including cuts, bruises, and scratches, during the struggle that resulted in Vanessa's death. The news of Vanessa's fate shocked not only her family and the people of Princeton, but also her colleagues. According to a Google spokesperson, Vanessa Marcotte was a highly valued member of the Google team at their New York office, where she had worked for the past year and a half. She was known for her constant smile, her dedication to volunteer work, and her love of Boston sports. Her Google colleagues were deeply shocked and saddened by her death, and their thoughts were with her family and friends. Her alma mater, Boston University, paid tribute to her, expressing their deepest condolences to her family and friends, and stating that they were in their thoughts and prayers during this difficult time. The question remains, who was responsible for Vanessa Marcotte's tragic death? Investigators believe that the person who took her life was either a local resident or a frequent visitor to Princeton, and was likely familiar with the area. Furthermore, detectives think that Vanessa did not know her killer, and that their paths crossed by chance. While the investigation continued, law enforcement appealed to the public for assistance, setting up separate 24-hour phone lines for this purpose. A crucial eyewitness eventually came forward, reporting that they had seen Vanessa stop at a local convenience store to grab a drink of water after 1 p.m. on August 7th. At the time, she was seen walking and chatting on her cell phone. Based on this information, investigators believe that the attack on Vanessa likely occurred within the next 2 hours, between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. Notably, her phone was switched off at 2:11 p.m. and has remained inactive ever since. Police officers thoroughly searched the area where the body was found and the surrounding vicinity, following up on numerous leads, but their efforts were initially unsuccessful. 3 months later, the police received new information about the case. A new witness came forward, stating that on August 7th, they saw a dark-colored Ford SUV parked on the curb near where Vanessa's body was found, with its hood up on 2 separate occasions. The first time, the witness drove past the SUV at around 12:45 p.m. and noticed the driver, a Hispanic-looking man between 25 and 35 years old, standing next to the vehicle and talking on the phone. The second time, the witness drove past the same location at approximately 2:05 p.m., and the SUV was still parked in the same spot, but its hood was down, and there was no one visible inside or near the vehicle. Authorities launched a search for a Hispanic man who owns a black SUV and reportedly lives near Princeton. 6 months after Vanessa's death, on February 23, 2017, Worcester County District Attorney Joseph Early Jr. disclosed additional investigation details. The DNA found on Vanessa's body was sent to a lab, and a profile was created based on DNA evidence and witness testimony. The suspect is believed to be a Hispanic male, 20 to 30 years old, with an athletic build, medium height, and short or shaved hair. He likely owns or had access to a dark-colored SUV on the day of the crime and had visible upper body injuries within days of the attack. About 3 weeks after Vanessa Marcotte's death, a police officer on patrol in Worcester County noticed a man who resembled the suspect. He was driving a vehicle that was identical to the one seen on the day of the incident. The officer rapidly jotted down the license plate number and, after tracing the car's ownership, the police team proceeded to the man's house. Angelo Colon Ortiz, a 31-year-old Puerto Rican native, had no prior criminal record. He was a married father of 3 who had lived in Worcester for less than a year, working as a third-party contractor for FedEx, making deliveries in the Princeton area. Despite his seemingly ordinary life, Ortiz had a disturbing side. According to his neighbors, he was known to make inappropriate, vulgar comments to people in the neighborhood, which led them to describe him as perverted. Additionally, a former Princeton postal worker alleged that Ortiz would often make crude, sexually explicit comments in Spanish about her and other women to his co-worker. When questioned by the police about Vanessa Marcotte, Ortiz claimed he didn't know her and couldn't remember being in Princeton on the day of the attack. Despite this, he agreed to provide a DNA sample, which subsequently matched the DNA found under Vanessa's fingernails. Ortiz was arrested and charged 3 days later. Prosecutors alleged that on the day of the crime, Ortiz purchased $5 worth of gasoline from a store 6 miles from the scene at 2:35 p.m., implying that Vanessa was likely already dead by then, and Ortiz had returned to try to destroy evidence. Ortiz's lawyers claimed that Ortiz did not fully grasp his rights because of a language barrier, and Ortiz himself said he was not aware that he had the right to refuse to provide a DNA sample. Following a long trial, the judge rejected the defense's request to exclude the DNA evidence from the case. Ortiz pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of second-degree murder and robbery. The Marcotte family accepted the plea deal to avoid a difficult and emotional trial. In October 2022, hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michaela Gerecht. On November 19, 1988, Michaela, then 9 years old, and her friend Katrina were busy trying on different outfits for an upcoming school performance at their homes. The joy was palpable as it marked the beginning of the Thanksgiving break. Around 10 a.m., Katrina's dad gave her $5 to buy some candy. The two friends rushed to Michaela's house to ask her mom if they could visit the nearby store, which was less than a mile away. Although they had been to the store many times before, with family or older neighbors, Michaela's mom was hesitant to let them go alone, citing their young age and lack of experience. After some cajoling, Michaela's mom finally agreed, on the condition that they would purchase the candy and head straight back home. As Michaela was her parents' long-awaited first child, a true miracle, her mom was particularly concerned about her safety. Despite her reservations, Michaela's mom believed that nothing bad would happen, given the store's proximity and their plan to ride their scooters there. Michaela raced back to Katrina's house. They planned to use 2 scooters, so Katrina took hers and borrowed another one from her brother. They went to the store, parked their scooters nearby, and went inside to make their purchases. When they came out, they got engrossed in conversation and completely forgot about their scooters. They started walking home but quickly realized their mistake and returned to where they had left the scooters. That's when they noticed Michaela's scooter was missing. Assuming someone had moved it, they decided to search the store area from different angles. Michaela scanned the parking lot and soon spotted her scooter next to a car parked a short distance from the store. As she approached it, Katrina suddenly heard a terrifying scream. She ran back and saw a man grabbing Michaela and forcing her into the car beside her scooter. The man promptly got back in the driver's seat and sped off. Shaken, Katrina rushed into the store and alerted the cashier about the incident. The cashier immediately called the police, who arrived at the scene within minutes. The store employee also contacted Michaela's father, as they were acquainted, and informed him of the situation. Michaela's father, accompanied by Katrina's father, hurried to the store where investigators had already gathered. He instructed his wife to remain at home by the phone, awaiting a possible call from the police. The detectives faced a multitude of challenges from the outset. The lack of surveillance cameras near the store and the sole witness, Katrina, who was in a state of deep shock and barely able to speak, hindered their progress. Her father was permitted to take her home, leaving the store cashier as the initial lead. She recounted a suspicious individual loitering around the store shortly before the abduction. He had parked his car, exited, but never entered the store, instead opting to walk along the building, peering through windows and seemingly watching them. The cashier had a gut feeling that he might be planning to rob her. Based on her description, the man was white, approximately 30 years old, and sported a prominent mustache. He arrived in an old maroon-colored sedan, but the model and license plate number remained unclear. After gathering the suspect's description, the police created a composite sketch and disseminated it to the media. News of the abduction spread rapidly throughout the city and beyond, leaving the public shocked that such a brazen act could occur in a busy area. The police also shared the sketch and a description of the suspect's car with hundreds of patrol officers across the county. Officers began stopping vehicles matching the description, hoping to find her alive. Meanwhile, the detectives turned over Maya's scooter to forensic experts for analysis. They suspected that the kidnapper had witnessed Maya and Katrina's arrival at the store and strategically positioned one of the scooters near the back door of his car to facilitate the abduction. This led them to believe that his fingerprints might be on the scooter, and indeed they discovered a fingerprint that didn't match anyone in Katrina's family or the 9-year-old girl. However, there was a hitch. The fingerprint was incomplete, making it challenging to conduct a database search at the time, as the technology wasn't sophisticated enough for such procedures. As a result, the police had to rely on direct comparisons with potential suspects. By the evening of the abduction, the FBI had joined the investigation, prompted by a surge in child disappearances, not only in Hayward but also in surrounding cities. They suspected a link between Michaela's case and these other vanishings. Despite the FBI's involvement and widespread media attention, little progress was made in locating the missing girl. Michaela's parents were understandably heartbroken, and her mother was consumed by guilt, replaying the events leading up to the abduction. In particular, she recalled an unsettling incident just a week prior, where Michaela had risen unusually early, sat at the kitchen table, and claimed to be writing a poem. This was peculiar, given her daughter's usual sleep patterns, and the poem's theme, people being abducted and hidden in attics but not killed, seemed eerily prescient. At the time, her mother had found it strange for a 9-year-old to conceive such ideas, but in hindsight, it took on an uncanny, almost prophetic quality, leaving her to wonder if Michaela had unwittingly foreseen her own fate. In the 2 days following the abduction, the police launched an exhaustive search for the suspect and the missing girl, but despite their best efforts, they failed to make any progress. In a bid to gather more information, they decided to re-interview Katrina, hoping that time might have jogged her memory. However, this decision led to a perplexing twist. The girl who witnessed the abduction and the cashier provided contradictory descriptions of the kidnapper's appearance. Katrina described the man as around 20 years old, with long, unkempt, light-colored hair that reached his shoulders and a face covered in pimples. She also remembered his piercing blue eyes, reminiscent of a fox's. Furthermore, she recalled some details about the car, a beige sedan with a boxy shape and numerous dents. In contrast, the cashier's suspicion had been sparked by a man near the store whose description was vastly different from Katrina's. This discrepancy presented a significant challenge for the investigators, who had already circulated an inaccurate composite sketch of the suspect through the media, and to patrol officers, leading the search for an entirely different individual. This unfolding drama took place within the critical first 48 hours following the abduction, the most crucial period for a swift resolution. Based on her description, they promptly created a new composite sketch and redistributed it. Additionally, the police decided to interview all men in the area with prior convictions for sexual offenses. Numerous volunteers also joined the efforts, going door to door to interview residents in the hopes of someone recognizing the abductor or providing any other relevant information. They posted thousands of flyers featuring her photo and a description of the incident, and in just the initial few days, a staggering 42,000 of these flyers were distributed. After several days, they received their first promising lead. 3 individuals contacted them, reporting a hiking trip in a vast national park near their city. During their excursion, the hikers stumbled upon footprints on the ground, distinguishing one set belonging to an adult and another to a child. They decided to follow these tracks, eventually coming across a blanket and empty fast food wrappers deep in the forest. The police considered the possibility that these tracks might be connected to Maya and her abductor. The FBI's psychological profile also suggested that the abductor would likely take his victim to a secluded location, far removed from civilization. Given the park's size and its proximity to the city, it seemed to align perfectly with this theory. Detectives decided to conduct a thorough search of the park, utilizing all available resources. They scoured the ground, while helicopters equipped with thermal imaging scanned the area from above. However, all their efforts yielded nothing, as they couldn't find her or any incriminating evidence. The police extended their search to other parks, mountains, and remote areas, but all leads proved futile. Meanwhile, the case's nationwide media coverage sparked a deluge of tips, with over 4,000 received within the first month alone. Investigators faced the daunting task of pursuing each lead, a challenge that proved overwhelming. The case was a hot topic of discussion among San Francisco's neighboring residents and nearby cities, with prominent figures even making public appeals for information. As the search continued, a substantial $70,000 reward was offered, and Michaela's photograph was plastered on millions of milk cartons across the state. Despite the massive community effort and numerous leads, detectives made little headway. By December's end, a month and a half into the investigation, the police had only managed to exhaust thousands of leads, with no progress made in the following months. Still, the police, along with Michaela's mother, who had launched her own investigation, studying similar cases and searching for possible suspects, persisted in their efforts, holding on to the hope that Michaela was still alive, being held captive by her abductor. In 1991, detectives focused on 43-year-old Timothy Binder, and the deeper they dug into his background, the more disturbing it became. Before Michaela's abduction, Binder was already under police suspicion due to his odd behavior. He had been sending gifts, letters, and money to several young girls, with some of these letters featuring highlighted Bible passages that included phrases like, "I have chosen you," and "be with me." Parents of some of these girls grew concerned and reported him to the police, which led to an interrogation of Binder. He claimed he was simply trying to befriend these girls, thinking they were lonely. However, the investigation uncovered a worrying history. In 1985, Binder was fired from his job in Child Protective Services in Colorado for collecting personal information about young girls and then sending them gifts and letters. A search of his van revealed many photographs of children and Bible passages decorating the interior. Additionally, Binder had previously been arrested for trying to lure 2 girls into his van, although no charges were filed. Furthermore, he regularly visited local cemeteries, spending an unusual amount of time at the graves of young girls. 6 months before Michaela was abducted, a 7-year-old girl named Amber vanished in the same area. Binder got in touch with Amber's mother, offering to help and frequently visiting her home. He even sent a letter to the police, predicting that the next girl to go missing would be 9 years old. Months later, Michaela, who was also 9, was abducted. After she disappeared, Binder contacted her mother repeatedly, visited her home, and offered his assistance. But the disturbing pattern continued. In early December 1988, Binder sent a Christmas card to an FBI profiler he had spoken to before, and the card showed a girl holding up 4 fingers. Shortly after, a 4-year-old girl went missing in the same town. Despite these disturbing circumstances, which comprised circumstantial evidence, detectives secured a search warrant for Binder's home, where he resided with his wife. Unfortunately, their search yielded no concrete leads linking him to the abductions. When news of Binder's peculiar behavior hit the newspapers, the public began to suspect he might be a serial killer, resulting in harassment and attacks on him and his family. He subsequently sued the city authorities for disseminating misinformation and emerged victorious. Detectives persisted in investigating Binder for several months, but ultimately concluded that there was no concrete evidence implicating him in these crimes. Some detectives believed that he posed no threat to children, and his unusual behavior might have been unrelated to these cases. Consequently, the police shifted their focus towards alternative suspects. A new substantial lead did not emerge until December 1992, 4 years after Michaela's disappearance. An inmate from Indiana, serving time for robbery, contacted the police, claiming to know the identity of her abductor. He stated that he had helped bury her body in the same park where traces of evidence had been discovered. Initially, investigators showed little interest in this tip, but when the inmate wrote a letter to a prominent San Francisco newspaper, the police faced harsh criticism, and under public pressure, they reluctantly decided to interview him. He promised not only to pinpoint Michaela's exact burial site, but also to lead them directly to the killer. The inmate was transferred to California, where he collaborated with the police on a search mission. He claimed that the body was buried in a gladiolus field, and the officers devoted all their resources to scouring that area. The search lasted 8 hours, until the inmate unexpectedly confessed that he had fabricated the entire story. He explained that his intention was to bring some comfort to Michaela's family and help them find closure. However, Michaela's relatives and the police were outraged by his false statement. As a consequence, the inmate received an additional 6.5-year prison sentence, nearly doubling his original sentence, and was ordered to pay Michaela's family $6,000 in compensation. In August 2000, a new lead emerged in the case with the arrest of Curtis Anderson, suspected of murdering a 7-year-old girl in Valo a year earlier. He confessed to the crime and was imprisoned. However, detectives harbored suspicions that he might be responsible for similar crimes. For 7 years, no concrete evidence supported this theory until Curtis reached out to the FBI. Weakened by poor health, he wanted to confess to additional crimes before his demise. His confession revealed that he had killed 13 more girls and women, including 7-year-old Amber, who vanished 6 months before Michaela. Curtis provided specific details that made investigators take his involvement seriously. Nonetheless, proving his guilt remained a daunting task, as there was no physical evidence and the victims' bodies remained unfound. Regarding Michaela's case, Curtis denied any involvement, despite his car's striking resemblance to Katrina's description. Although FBI agents planned to continue questioning him, Curtis passed away in 2012, halting the investigation. A new lead emerged when an inmate contacted the police, suggesting that his associate Lauren Herzog bore a remarkable likeness to the composite sketch of the suspect. Detectives were intrigued, given Lauren and his partner's conviction for multiple murders they committed together. Although suspected of killing 19 people, investigators could only prove some of these crimes. Notably, Lauren had taken his own life in prison a month before the inmate came forward. Undeterred, the police investigated Lauren's potential involvement. A younger photo of Lauren did resemble the composite sketch, but detectives required more concrete evidence. They proceeded to excavate a well where Lauren and his partner had disposed of their victims' bodies. The excavation yielded thousands of bone fragments, which medical experts meticulously examined. After extensive analysis, it was determined that the bones belonged to 5 different girls, but none matched Michaela's DNA. Despite excavating multiple wells, the police were unable to find any evidence linking Lauren to the case. In 2018, a significant breakthrough emerged in the case. David Mitch, a man already imprisoned for killing his 39-year-old girlfriend in 1989, was charged with the murders of 2 women in 1986 near Michaela's town. The key to this development was modern DNA analysis, which enabled investigators to link David to these crimes by analyzing biological material found under the victim's nails, something that was impossible back then. Detectives decided to investigate his possible involvement in Michaela's case and found several intriguing connections. They discovered that David was in the same area when Michaela was abducted, matching Katrina's description and driving a similar car. Since David's fingerprints were already on record, experts re-examined the partial fingerprint found on Michaela's scooter. Thanks to modern technology, they made a significant breakthrough. The fingerprint on the scooter perfectly matched David's. By 2020, the hope of Michaela being alive had faded, and David was charged with her murder. He denied his involvement, and the case went to trial in early 2023. Preliminary hearings took place, and the judge ruled that there was sufficient evidence to proceed with the trial. David's lawyer attempted to challenge the evidence, claiming that the scooter's fingerprint didn't necessarily link his client to the crime. However, given the circumstances, this argument seemed dubious, as it was apparent that the abductor had deliberately left the scooter near the car's back door to ambush her when she approached. The defense also tried to contest the murder charges, as Michaela's body was never found, implying a lack of proof of her death. However, this argument held little weight, as numerous modern cases have resulted in convictions without the recovery of the victim's body, given the substantial evidence. Furthermore, David had a history of violent crimes throughout his life. Michaela's father traveled from out of state to attend the press conference announcing the arrest of his daughter's kidnapper. Unfortunately, Michaela's mother, who had held on to hope of finding her daughter alive all these years, was unable to attend as she battled cancer. Shortly after the news of the arrest, she passed away, thanking the investigators for uncovering the truth before her life's end. The police pledged to continue searching for Michaela's remains, offering a $10,000 reward for any valuable information that could lead to her discovery. David's trial is about to start and will cover 3 separate cases: the murder of Michaela and 2 other cases where his DNA was found under the victim's fingernails. Initially, the prosecution pushed for the death penalty, but when the district attorney changed, the new one decided not to pursue it. If David is found guilty of all 3 murders, he will not receive a life sentence, but rather a prison sentence of several decades. This decision has outraged the victims, families, and garnered significant media attention, with David's lawyer being the only one to support this change. However, considering David is already 62 years old, it's unlikely he will live to see the end of even this reduced sentence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Alicia Ross. Alicia Ross was born on February 8, 1980, in Markham, Ontario, Canada, to biological parents who relinquished their rights to the child. She was adopted by Marvin and Sharon Ross, who provided her with love and care. Despite her adoptive parents' divorce, they maintained a friendly relationship and continued to support Alicia. Alicia excelled in school, particularly in drawing and photography. She had a passion for traveling and exploring new cities and countries. After finishing school, she spent a year in Australia before returning home and enrolling in university. In the summer of 2005, Alicia went on a hiking trip in the mountains where she met her boyfriend, Sean Hine. On August 16th, Alicia went for a walk in the park with her adoptive mother and their dogs. She seemed happy and shared that she was expecting a promotion at work to the position of senior sales manager. Alicia was proud of her achievement and expressed her desire to introduce Sean to her adoptive parents. That evening, Alicia and Sean went on a date, and after returning home, they had a great time together. Around midnight, Sean left Alicia's house, promising to call her as soon as he got home. When he called around midnight, Alicia didn't pick up the phone. Sean wasn't overly concerned, thinking she had simply fallen asleep. Sean tried to call Alicia again the next morning, but when she didn't answer, he began to worry. Unbeknownst to him, Alicia had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mysterious disappearance that would puzzle investigators and her family for years to come. When Alicia didn't pick up, Sean became genuinely worried and contacted a mutual acquaintance who worked in the same office as Ross. From him, Sean learned that Alicia hadn't come to work, and he immediately rushed to her house on the morning of August 17th. Sharon and Julius, Alicia's parents, were planning to play golf with friends and left the house around 10 a.m. They noticed Alicia's car in the driveway, but thought little of it, assuming a colleague had picked her up. About half an hour later, Sean arrived at the Ross residence and found no sign of Alicia. He called the police to report her missing and also contacted Sharon, informing her of the situation. The police were already present when Sharon and Julius arrived home, alarmed by the news. Sean was the first person to notice Alicia's disappearance and inform the authorities. Moreover, he was the last person to see her alive and well the evening before she vanished. According to him, they had said goodbye at the gate where his car was parked around midnight, and she hadn't been in touch since then. When Sharon approached Alicia's room, she immediately noticed that all her daughter's personal belongings, without which she never left the house, were in their places. Her purse, passport, driver's license, keys, cell phone, bank cards, and cash were all left in the room, indicating she wouldn't have gone anywhere, let alone left without them. The gate was open, but not forced, suggesting that the missing person either let her abductor in herself or willingly left with someone. In the backyard, the police found some disorder. The lawn and flowers were trampled as if someone had fallen there. A pair of cigarettes and the right sandal of the girl, which she had been wearing the evening before, were found on the ground, laid out in a straight line. Neither Alicia nor her parents smoked, so the cigarettes didn't belong to them, and Sean claimed he never smoked that particular brand. Sean was almost immediately considered the prime suspect. Firstly, he was noticeably nervous, and his account seemed somewhat confused and disjointed. Secondly, he was the first to report Alicia's disappearance to the police, even before speaking with her parents and confirming that they too had not seen her. Additionally, law enforcement found biological traces on the girl's bed belonging to both her and Sean. Based on this, the investigation speculated that Alicia might have denied Sean intimacy, and he decided to force her, then trying to cover his tracks and stage her disappearance, which he likely caused by ending her life. When Sean was brought to the station, questioned, and the investigator's theory presented to him, he was stunned. He was dismayed to be the prime suspect and swore he would never harm his girlfriend, as he loved her. He also admitted that they did indeed have intimate moments that evening, but insisted it was consensual. The missing girl's parents also had nothing bad to say about Sean. He hadn't argued with their daughter, hadn't mistreated her, and she spoke only well of him. Their relationship was progressing rapidly and quite happily, so much so that Alicia even hoped to have a future with him. The police were baffled by the disappearance of a young woman, Alicia, who had no reason to leave her life behind. She was awaiting a promotion at her job and was a responsible person, so it was unlikely she would just vanish without a word. If something unexpected had happened, she would have contacted her parents. Yet, she had left without her documents, money, and phone. The police questioned her boyfriend Sean, but lacked enough evidence to detain him. They didn't rule him out as a suspect, though, and kept an eye on him. Sean seemed depressed and upset, and the massive search effort began the day after Alicia's disappearance. The police thoroughly inspected her home and yard, questioned neighbors, and examined the surrounding area. However, no one reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious that night. The police theorized that Alicia vanished between midnight and sunrise, a time when the streets are usually quiet. Flyers with Alicia's photo were distributed throughout the city, and her story was featured in the news, generating significant public interest. The police received dozens of calls daily, but most information turned out to be false or mistaken. Sean participated in the search efforts, despite being the prime suspect, and even gave a media interview, pleading for help and displaying photos of the happy couple. The search for Alicia expanded to include abandoned buildings, wooded areas, and wastelands. Her parents, believing she was alive and being held against her will, appealed to the public for help. The police suspected someone close to Alicia might be involved, possibly killing her, due to the lack of signs of struggle or forced entry. Despite their efforts, no concrete leads were found, and the case remained a mystery. 2 weeks after Alicia's disappearance, Sean was arrested on an unrelated charge of driving under the influence and resisting arrest. This led to speculation that he was drowning his guilt in alcohol. Alicia's parents gave another interview, revealing they had only known Sean through their daughter's accounts and didn't know him personally. They considered the possibility that Alicia might have hidden certain details about her relationship with Sean to avoid upsetting them. The police interviewed Sean's neighbors to see if they had noticed anything unusual, but no significant information emerged. The case seemed to have hit a dead end, with the only option left being to keep pressuring Sean to confess. However, a month after Alicia's disappearance, a surprising twist occurred. Daniel Sylvester, a 31-year-old man who lived nearby, called the police and confessed to killing Alicia, revealing where he had hidden her body. Daniel was a reclusive, unemployed man who lived with his mother in a house adjacent to the Ross family home. Despite living near each other, Daniel and Alicia had never interacted before, but Alicia had seen him a few times and considered him mentally unwell due to his odd behavior. Daniel had severe socialization issues from an early age and harbored deep resentment towards women. He was diagnosed with social anxiety disorder at the age of 8 and had been receiving continuous psychological care, although therapy didn't help much. In his teenage years, he confessed to having dark fantasies of attacking and overpowering a girl, which excited him. Despite these fantasies, specialists were confident that they would remain just in his imagination. After finishing school, Daniel stopped attending therapy sessions and decided not to continue his education. He became a recluse, living in his mother's house, almost completely isolating himself from the outside world. He spent his days sitting in his room, often visiting adult websites, and occasionally ventured out in the evenings to secretly watch his neighbors, peeping into their windows. He especially enjoyed watching when someone was engaged in intimate activities, which excited him. However, Daniel remained a virgin well into his 30s, satisfying himself with solitary activities. The neighbors hardly ever saw him and considered him a harmless guy. However, the mutilated body of Alicia was later found at the location Daniel had indicated, leaving many questions about why the police had overlooked him during their initial investigation. The condition of the remains indicated that the girl had been dealt with extreme cruelty, with injuries that suggested she had been hit by a car. The exact cause of death could not be determined, but at least 3 injuries were incompatible with life. Daniel initially claimed that he had an argument with his neighbor on a bush-covered path between their homes, during which she called him a loser, angering him, and he struck her on the head. When she fell, he kicked her several times in the chest. However, something in his story did not add up, and there were missing details and specifics. Law enforcement had to clarify the circumstances and chronology of events to learn how exactly the girl received such injuries. Daniel spied on his neighbor Alicia and her boyfriend on the fateful evening. He watched them from a window as they were intimate, then moved back to the bushes, but didn't leave. When Alicia's boyfriend left, she saw Daniel spying on her and became angry, yelling at him and calling him a pervert. She then turned to go back into the house, but Daniel snapped, leading to a brutal beating and murder. The word pervert triggered Daniel's rage, reminiscent of childhood taunts from girls. He punched Alicia powerfully on the head, knocking her to the ground, then choked and kicked her, inflicting 33 fractures and extensive internal bleeding. After realizing Alicia was dead, Daniel moved her body to his garage, stripped her naked, and masturbated to relieve tension. He then put the corpse in the trunk of his mother's car and disposed of it in a secluded area outside the city. Upon returning home, he showered, changed clothes, and behaved as if nothing had happened. Daniel confessed to the crime but claimed it was unintentional, citing his mental illness and anger issues. However, the prosecution argued that despite his mental health issues, Daniel was fully aware of the consequences of his actions and acted with merciless intent. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation, which confirmed Daniel's responsibility for his actions. Daniel was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 16 years. March 14, 2003, The Hobbit Pub, Southampton, England. On that evening, everyone at this pub was chilling out. Among them were a girl named Hannah Foster and her friend. Both of them were having a great time there, and when they felt it was getting late, both friends left the pub by 10:50 p.m. Now, since it was quite late at night, Hannah Foster's friend caught a bus from a road named Portswood and headed home. On the other hand, Hannah started walking home because her house was just 800 meters away, roughly 0.5 miles. 3 people lived in Hannah's house: her father, Trevor Foster, her mother, Hilary Foster, and her younger sister, Sarah. The Fosters were early sleepers and early risers, so they usually went to bed early. They assumed that their daughter would come home, eat, and then go to bed on her own. However, when Hannah's mother woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning, she couldn't find Hannah anywhere in the house. Normally, it wouldn't take Hannah more than half an hour to come home, but now several hours had passed. Therefore, Hannah's mother, Hilary, called her daughter, but Hannah wasn't answering any calls. After this, gradually Hannah's father and younger sister also come to know about her. Following this, Hannah's father, Trevor Foster, calls the girl with whom Hannah went to the Hobbit Pub the previous night, but she tells the same story that I've already told you. After this, Hannah's family also tries to find her themselves, but by now it was already 10:30 in the morning, so Hannah's father starts to worry a lot about his daughter. Because of this, he goes to the Southampton police station and files a missing complaint for him. Now the police start investigating the missing person case from their side and first trace her phone. Well, the good thing was that Hannah's phone was active, and the police traced the phone through the mobile towers. Naturally, the location of Hannah's phone was showing approximately 20 to 25 miles away from her home. Now the police reached there within an hour. Where the police found Hannah's phone was the city's recycling center, and along with the phone, they also found Hannah's bag there, but Hannah was not found. On March 15th, Hannah is also extensively searched for, but her whereabouts are not found. As they continue the search, March 16th arrives, and Southampton police receive a call from an anonymous man from the outskirts of the city. He informs them that he has just seen a girl's body in the bushes. A police team is dispatched to the location provided by the man. Since the previous day, the police had been searching for Hannah Foster, and they also had her picture. Therefore, the police first compare Hannah's picture with the discovered dead body, and they believe it to be Hannah Foster's. Subsequently, Hannah's family is also summoned, and upon seeing a member of their family in this condition, they become quite emotional. Nonetheless, the body is then sent for post-mortem. The police have to wait for several hours for it. However, when the post-mortem report arrives, it states that Hannah was first raped and then murdered by strangulation. However, some traces of the killer's semen were found on Hannah's clothes, and this made the police believe that the case would be solved soon, because DNA would be extracted from the semen and matched with the database to find the killer. But the police's imagination proved wrong when the DNA sample of the killer was not found in their database. Anyway, here the police, losing hope, check Hannah's call details, which leads the investigators to take another step towards solving this case. Actually, Hannah had last called the emergency number 999 from her phone, and the operator had answered the call. The call lasted for 50 seconds. After that, the police reached the operator and collect Hannah's call recording from there. In addition, the operator said, "I kept saying, 'This is emergency helpline, what's an emergency?' for 50 seconds, but there was no response from the other end." When investigators enhanced the recording of Hannah's call, they realized that she is sitting in a moving vehicle. Additionally, there is another faint voice with a South Asian accent. The man asks Hannah questions while she sits quietly, appearing scared and intimidated. After obtaining the call recording, the investigating team accelerates progress in Hannah Foster's murder case. Now, the police also check all the CCTV cameras in the area where Hannah's friend last bid her farewell and caught a bus. After scrutinizing several CCTV footages from that road, the police eventually narrow down to 7 suspect vehicles. On the other hand, Hannah's parents are eager to see their daughter's killer brought to justice swiftly. They now also discuss these 7 vehicles in public. In the meantime, on March 26th, Hannah's parents talked to people through a local crime TV show called Crime Watch about those cars. As a result, it emerged that one of the 7 suspect vehicles shown on TV was a van belonging to their company, Hazelwood Foods. The supervisor, James Dennis, called in and said that the driver of this van does not have his own vehicle, so he also uses this van to come and go from his home. Furthermore, that night, the driver had gone to deliver on this road. The time and location of the van were exactly where Hannah had started to walk home alone. After that, the police get a good lead for the first time in this case. The man driving the van was named Maninder Pal Singh Kohli. Upon speaking to the company's supervisor, it was found that on the morning of March 15th, Maninder Pal came to work, but there were some marks on his face, whereas there were no marks on his face the previous day, that is on the 14th. Additionally, on March 15th, Maninder only worked half a day and then took half a day off, citing a back pain reason. However, it was only later discovered by the police that Maninder hadn't returned to work since that day. Now, hearing the whole story, investigating officers along with forensic experts arrived at Hazelwood Company. Subsequently, the van driven by Maninder was thoroughly examined by forensic experts, and some traces of semen and blood were found in his vehicle as well. With all this evidence, such as Maninder Pal's disappearance, finding semen and blood in his van, they were pointing fingers directly at him for Hannah's murder. However, apart from this, the police once again scrutinize Maninder Pal's van through CCTV cameras, and it becomes clear from the CCTV footage that Maninder Pal had taken his van to the recycling center on the night of March 14th, and where Hannah's body was found, his van had also passed through that road. Maninder Pal had now become the prime suspect for the police. Therefore, the police now embark on the search for Maninder Pal, and first they go to his home address, obtained from the sandwich company where he used to work. There, Maninder Pal's wife and 2 children used to live, and his wife was a citizen of the UK. But upon reaching there, the police learn something that completely changes the course of the case. In fact, Maninder's wife reveals that he had actually left for India on March 18th because Maninder's mother was very ill. After learning this, it was imperative for the Southampton police to apprehend Maninder Pal in the Hannah Foster murder case, but it was equally challenging. And then, amidst all this, when a blood sample is taken from one of Maninder Pal's sons and the DNA is extracted from it, it matches the DNA found on Hannah's clothes and inside Maninder Pal's van. Now, because a son inherits about half of his father's genes, therefore, the DNA of both the father and son is approximately 99.99% identical. It had already been confirmed that Maninder Pal was indeed the real culprit. After that, the police from England contacts India through the government. Now, since Maninder Pal's ancestral home was in the city of Chandigarh in India, assistance is sought from the police there, Subsequently, the Chandigarh police obtained the address of Maninder's house and reached there. Here, the police find out that Maninder Pal had come to meet his mother a few days ago, but after staying there for 3 to 4 days, he left. Since then, he has not contacted his home. The police also learn another piece of information from Maninder Pal's family at home, that when he was in England, he used to wear a turban and keep a beard. But when he came to India, he got a clean shave and also got his hair cut. Until now, Hannah's parents had also found out about their daughter's killer, and they were also waiting for him to be caught. But now, the Chandigarh police was not giving this case much priority. By this time, the news of this case had not even appeared in the Indian media, so normal people didn't know much about it. As time passed slowly, there was not much progress in the investigation. A considerable amount of time had passed, so Hannah's parents took it upon themselves to catch the killer. Then, about 15 months after their daughter's death on July 10, 2004, they come to India. At this time, they were only in India for 10 days. After that, they come straight to Chandigarh and speak to the local media there, appealing to catch their daughter's killer, Maninder Pal. Apart from this, Hannah's parents had separate pictures of Maninder. In one photo, he had a beard and a turban, while in another photo, he had shaved his beard and cut his hair. It was easy to identify Maninder through these pictures. After this, Hannah's parents waited for a few days. But then they decided to go to Delhi because there are national and international media offices. I made a promise that we would be friends. After this step by Hannah's parents, the news of their daughter's murder spread throughout India within 24 hours. The headline of every newspaper and news channel became Hannah Foster and Maninder Pal. Here, Hannah's parents also arranged a free hotline so that anyone who knew about the murderer could call this number. The Southampton police here announced through a news agency called The Sun that they would give 5 million Indian rupees to the person who provides any information about Maninder Pal. By now, this news had spread like wildfire throughout India. Then, on July 15, 2004, a car driver residing in the city of Darjeeling, in the state of West Bengal, India, called a retired police officer whom he knew. Now, this police officer had already retired. The driver called the officer and told him, "There is a man who has been living here for a few months, and his appearance resembles that of Hannah Foster's killer, as shown in the news. He started appearing here shortly after Hannah's murder." Upon hearing the driver's words, the retired officer immediately sets out to see this man. The officer remembered Maninder Pal's face because they were following this case through the news channel. Afterwards, when that driver showed the police officer the man, the officer was quite surprised. Then he immediately contacted the local police, and the local police caught Maninder Pal in the bus, going from Kalimpong town to Nepal. Here, the police find out that Maninder Pal was planning to flee to Nepal after seeing his news on TV channels and newspapers. Besides, the police also find out that Maninder Pal had changed his name to Mike Davis in West Bengal. In addition to Maninder, there was also a woman on the bus, and then it was revealed that Maninder had remarried after coming to India. Now, Maninder was arrested and brought to Delhi, and during the custody of a few days here, Maninder confessed to his crime. Then he told the whole story of how he murdered Hannah that night. The story was something like this. Actually, on the night of March 14, 2003, Maninder was parked on that road drinking in his van where Hannah passed by. But when he saw Hannah, bad thoughts started coming to his mind. Afterwards, he forcibly kidnapped Hannah and placed her in the van. Although there, Hannah requested to be released from Maninder, but Maninder paid no heed to her requests. In the meantime, Hannah also called the emergency helpline number, but due to Maninder's presence, she couldn't say anything. This led the call operator to believe it might be a missed dial. Later, Maninder takes Hannah to a deserted area and rapes her. However, after committing the crime, he realizes that if he lets Hannah go alive, she will go to the police and file a complaint. Therefore, Maninder strangles her to death. Then he disposes of Hannah's body where it was found. On March 15th, the next day, Maninder takes half a day off from work under the pretext of a back pain. but he had Hannah's mobile phone and handbag with him, so he dumps them in a recycling bin at the city recycling center. Afterwards, he goes to one of his friends and asks for some money on loan because he had to go to India to meet his sick mother. However, his friend doesn't have as much money as Maninder needed. Then Maninder comes back home and also tells his British wife that his mother is sick in India and he needs to go there and requires some money. Understanding Maninder's need, his wife talks to her father, and on March 17th, Maninder's father-in-law lends him some money. The very next day, Maninder catches a flight to India. However, the excuse of his mother being sick was just a pretext. In reality, Maninder had come to India to escape from the England police. Upon arriving in India, Maninder goes to Chandigarh, his ancestral home, meets his mother, but here he completely changes his appearance. After changing his appearance, Maninder goes to Darjeeling, and after some time he changes his name and marries another woman there, where he starts living thereafter. Now, because neither anyone in India knew about Hannah Foster's murder nor about Maninder Pal, Maninder wasn't caught for 15 months. But then, when Hannah's parents come to India, only then is Maninder caught. Anyway, after that, Maninder is brought to Delhi, and then on July 28, 2004, giving an interview to a news channel, he confessed his crime on TV. Ella Foster. Let's question little that I was calling up over the mic up. We event last bugged on Leslie Lord that she's looking. Just take away low and like you know, there on the other road and let's go how to get. Then I start for But upon the whole incident, while confessing, Maninder denies and says, "That night I had drunk a lot. I didn't want to kill Hannah, but when I met her, then Hannah started threatening to complain to the police. Although I threatened her a lot, but she didn't agree, which led me to kill her. I wrote up here on bed late. Put that my mother is very ill in India. I want to work with the eyes though. It is very, very vital upon me and all of that. Her, that beer, I was totally that might, my hand was, and I done let crying." However, in August 2004, Maninder Pal changed his statement. He said, "I didn't do all this willingly, but it was done to me forcibly." After this statement, Maninder was placed under judicial custody in Delhi, and then the process of extradition to Britain begins. This process takes about 3 years, but finally on June 8, 2007, the court granted permission for Maninder Pal to go to England. Once in England, Hampshire police arrest Maninder. Then Maninder's blood sample is taken, and it matches 100% with the DNA found from Hannah's clothes and semen obtained from the van. After that, from December 10, 2007, the trial begins in the Winchester Crown Court. Here, Maninder appeals not guilty to all the charges against him. Maninder said, "That night, some criminals broke the window of the van and threw Hannah's body inside the van. Now, because they was drunk, to trap me, those criminals forced me to rip Hannah, and they may even force to kill her." Even in court, Hazelwood Foods Company supervisor James Dennis testified, but Maninder said, "I borrowed 16,000 euros from James, and he is also under the misconception that I am having an affair with his wife. That's why James is targeting me." Maninder also said, "Maybe James hired those 3 men to frame me and forced me to commit this crime on the night of March 14th. But in the end, when the police investigated Maninder Pal's all statements, it all turned out to be lies. And finally, on November 25, 2008, all the allegations against Maninder Pal were proven. After that, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Now he will be imprisoned without parole for at least 24 years. At the time of sentencing, he was 41 years old, and he will remain in jail until 2030. Of the 5 million rupees reward offered for catching Maninder Pal, 367,000 rupees were given to the taxi driver who first informed the police about Maninder Pal. With this, the money was divided among 12 other people, because besides the taxi driver Jason Lepsha, those people also played an important role in solving this case. However, Jason used that money to buy land and then established a school for disadvantaged children on it, named the Hannah Memorial Academy in Foster's memory. Then, in 2006, when Hannah's parents visited Darjeeling and learned about this, they were very pleased. When these people returned to England, Hannah's parents started a registered charity to help Jason along with other people. This now greatly helps Jason Lepcha's school. So, friends, this was the complete story of the Hannah Foster murder case.